Welcome everyone to the meeting, and welcome to those watching online at home. The meeting is being webcast live, and everyone seated must use their microphones to be heard on the webcast. There are no scheduled fire alarms, so if one goes off, it's for real. There are two exits in this room, one through the double doors and another behind me to the right. First, some introductions. I'm Councillor Stephen Watson, I'm the chair. We have Councillor Simon Marlowe, Vice Chair, Neil Button, Interim Development Management Team Leader, Steve Fraser-Lim, Principal Planning Officer, Rani Gaturi, Planning Solicitor, Peter Mannings, Committee Support Officer, Jackie Bruce, Section 106 Programme Manager, Sarah Saunders, Head of Planning and Building Control, and we've also got Robert Jones, the Planning Officer. And I would like also to introduce the Council's Executive Member for Planning and Growth, Councillor Vicky Glover-Ward, who won't be taking an active part in this meeting, but is here in an observing capacity. So, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, Chair, from the committee, just one from Councillor Burt, and Councillor Connolly is a substitute tonight. Thank you.
On to Chairman's announcements, and I just may ask again that all participants please use your microphones when speaking, as the meeting is being webcasted. Now, do we have any declarations of interest? That's no declarations of interest. Moving on to the minutes of we have before us the minutes from the meeting held on 23rd of October 2024. Are there any amendments? Well, if there are no amendments needed, can we have a proposal? Councillor Devonshire, and is that seconded? Councillor Buckmaster, and can we have a vote on that? For any against and no abstention? Any abstentions? Yes. Those minutes have been agreed. Okay. Right, we have before us, we're up to on 5A of the pack. We have before us an application reference 3/24/0294/FUL for outline approval for a residential development for around 200 new market and affordable homes, and full planning approval for the construction of a new medical centre, car parking area, related draining, and SUDS, that's Sustainable Drainage Systems Infrastructure, with associated access to Hare Street Road and enabling works to the existing highway as defined in the land use parameter and detailed access plans at land north of Hare Street Road, Buntingford, Hertfordshire. Now, before we move on to the presentation, we have a number of speakers, and I would like to invite members to consider whether you wish to extend public speaking time slots to 6 minutes rather than the 3 minutes. The Constitution gives the committee the authority to depart from the arrangements of the Constitution and determine specific arrangements for public speaking at certain applications as it sees fit. It's just that we have a number of councillors who, district councillors, who get 5 minutes. It doesn't affect them, it just affects the other speakers for and against.
Could I ask a quick question? Have those speakers requested an extension?
Well, there was an email which I believe the planning officer had from the doctor's surgery, basically asking for a little bit more time.
They would like some more time.
Yeah, so it's your decision as the committee now whether you want to vary the rules from the usual 3 minutes and make it 6. But it's a member decision.
Councillor Carter.
Yes, could I just check, would that be, so how would that time be split between people speaking for and against.
Right, well, there'd be the usual 3-minute slots would be doubled to 6, which is shared in the usual way. The speakers are all aware of that, that they could get more time because I made them aware of it. The only difference is it's more than usual. So they've already primed to share the time, whatever you agree, whether it's 3 or 6. If you leave it as it is, it's 3. But if you decide to go for 6, then it changes nothing, but they share the time.
Councillor Copley.
I mean, my view on this is given, you know, the serious nature of what we're considering, I think it would be sensible to extend to 6 so that we can ensure that we do hear everything that we want to.
And Councillor Stowe.
Looking at this sheet here, are we still correct in thinking there's altogether 4 speakers?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 people objecting, yeah, and then 2 for. So they get 6 minutes shared on each
Right.
side of it.
On that basis, they get 3 minutes each.
Yeah, and then
So-
the registered town council speaker gets 6 on his own.
No, I'm happy with that. I'll support it.
It needs to be a proposal, and it needs to be voted on.
Councillor Copley.
I'm happy to propose that we extend the time.
And Councillor Stowe is seconding. So can I have a vote for approval? That's unanimous, I think. All right. So I would like to invite Steve Fraser-Lim to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. Here we have the site, which is on the eastern side of Buntingford, the urban edge of Buntingford, bounded by Hare Street Road to the south and the Causeway to the north. Next slide, please. This is the view from Hare Street Road, looking westwards towards the entrance of the town, and the site entrance will be formed sort of where that kind of muddy puddle is, just next to the road there, and the entrance to the bridleway. Next slide, please. And then a sort of further view of Hare Street Road as we move down into Buntingford, and the site frontage onto Hare Street Road is just there on the right hand side. Next slide, please. This is a view, Hare Street Road again, just looking the opposite direction, looking eastwards, and Pipkin Drive is the sort of side road that leads off to the left there, and the site is sort of beyond that, further, you know, in the further distance. Next slide, please. This is a view looking northwards across the site. So this is the public right of way that runs sort of roughly down the centre of the site, and the sort of areas of development will be on the left and right hand sides of this public right of way, and then the causeway is sort of in that tree line at the end of the view. Next slide, please. Another slide from Hare Street Road, this time looking southwards, and you can see there the sort of landscaped edge of another recent development that's sort of taken place on the south side of Hare Street Road. Next slide, please. This is along the northern edge of the site, adjacent to the causeway, existing sort of tree line, allotments that are just outside the site there, and then the causeway itself is just on the just behind those trees on the right. Next slide, please. This is a view within the causeway, so you can see that the sort of character of the causeway. It's a quiet, rural character, no separate footways, relatively low traffic flow that vehicles just travel up there to go to access the cemetery. Next slide, please. Some further views from looking sort of northwards across the site. The site boundary to the west, and the previous recently developed Taylor Wimpey development is sort of slightly visible behind those trees, and then the allotments beyond that. Next slide, please. And this is the view from within Howard Lane, and this is to the south of the site, and you can sort of see the entrance, the allotment beyond, and then beyond that the application site. Next slide, please. And another view along the northern edge of the site near the causeway, looking eastwards. Next slide, please. This is so the site, the application proposals, as you see from the description, it's what's known as a hybrid planning application. So the part of the proposals are submitted in full details, and that comprises the sort of vehicle entrance into the site and the medical centre, and also the drainage attenuation basin associated with that. And then in outline is the remainder of the development, which is the around 200 dwellings. And so this site location plan just shows the kind of the split between the outline and the full areas. So the sort of the blue hatched area is the is where the full details are, which is for the medical centre, and then the rest of the site, which within the red line, is the which has been submitted in outline. I'll just sort of concentrate on the full details next. So next slide, please. So the full details comprise the medical centre. So we can see here the sort of block plan of the medical centre. So the site access is from Hare Street Road on the right hand side of that slide. There's an area, sort of public open space, providing a sort of an entrance feature into the development. Then you've got the medical centre with associated sort of car parking behind that. Next slide, please. This is the ground floor plan of the medical centre. So the main entrance is a double height sort of reception space on the sort of the top corner of the L, if you like, and then there's a number of sort of treatment rooms and consultation rooms that leading off off the reception area. Next slide, please. And then there is so it's partly a single story height and partly 2 stories, and then on the second floor, which is only on part of the site, comprises other sort of meeting rooms and office space for the medical practice. Next slide, please. In terms of their external appearance, the design of the building is intended to be a sort of contemporary interpretation of sort of rural agricultural building vernacular. So, you know, perhaps a sort of barn type character with pitched roofs, but with, you know, contemporary detailing, fenestration and materials. This is the view from within the site, the vehicle entrance, as you sort of come in and access the car park, the sort of northern elevation of the building. Next slide, please. This is another view from the west. Next slide, please. And then this is the view that will face onto Hare Street Road, so the southern elevation. So you can see that single story wing that sort of projects forward, and the bus stop adjacent to the site there. You can also see. Next slide, please. Another view from the new open space at the front of the development. Next slide. And the double height reception space. Next slide. And then surrounding the medical centre, we've got some details, full details of the landscaping. So there are a number of trees that would be lost at the front of the site, sort of facing Hare Street Road, but new tree planting, replacing those, and then other new hedge planting around the car park and planting it within the car park area, and then also a lawn area at the front of the site within the open space. Next slide. And then the drainage basin, which will serve the medical centre, and then also parts of the residential development as they come forward, is shown here with landscaping around the wetland meadow planting proposals. Next slide, please. The drainage basin itself, just sections giving you an idea of the sort of the gradients as you go into that into the basin. The intention is that it should be relatively shallow design, so that you don't have to have sort of large obtrusive kind of fencing around it for safety reasons. Next slide, please. So moving on now to the sort of the wider site itself, which is also covered by the Outline Planning Permission. The proposals have come forward. They're not, as you can see from the report, it's not an allocated site within the district plan, so it hasn't been subject to the sort of steering group master planning process that some of those allocated sites have. But there has been quite a sort of iterative design process that's led to the proposals sort of where they currently are. The application proposals have been developed through public consultation events staged by the applicants before the submission. There's also been a design review panel, which has sort of fed into the design process, and also most recently a development management forum meeting on the site, sort of also discussing the various aspects of the proposals. And then from that, the sort of design concept has evolved, and in terms of having sort of green links through the site and a landscaped edge around the sort of eastern edge to kind of try and soften the appearance of the development in some of those sort of longer views. And also the design of the doctor surgery is subject to sort of discussion in the entrance, so providing a sort of attractive arrival experience within the development, and also other areas of open space, for instance, a sort of village green space just past the main entrance space. Next slide, please. From that kind of earlier work, we've moved on to the sort of parameter plans, and this is really what's we would be approving for the outline element, showing the development parcels. They have sort of revised, they have during the course of the application, there's been a bit more sort of detail added to this parameter plan. So it now shows two different density areas. So a lower density area adjacent to the edge of the site, and a higher density area, the lighter yellow, further to the west. Also a bit more detail about the sort of the types of spaces, the streets within the development, and areas where there should be a bit more emphasis in terms of sort of kind of key corner buildings and things like that. Next slide, please. This is the sort of indicative landscape master plan. So just shows the sort of landscape approach a bit more, the different kind of landscape character areas surrounding the site. You've got those sort of more urban village green spaces at the entrance and within the centre of the development, and then the more sort of natural planted green spaces around the edges, with play provision incorporated within those spaces. And then also the site sort of perimeter, existing trees and hedges are largely retained apart from that sort of southern corner where the medical centre is, and then there'll be new planting to sort of reinforce that those edges to help to soften the appearance of the development in sort of views into the site. Next slide, please. And then just moving on to the final sort of illustrative plan, which is the illustrative layout plan. This is not for approval. This is sort of the applicant showing how they can, which is one way they could achieve the sort of parameters of development, the numbers of units that are applied for within the sort of the areas proposed. But with full details would need to be submitted at the reserved matter stage, so there'd be this kind of layout would be looked at again later on in the process. Next slide, please. Then also just some sections, illustrative sections showing the sort of spaces within the site. So the sort of primary streets, the main spine road through the development, and how the bridleway could be incorporated sort of separate from the main road to meet the requirements of the county council for public rights of way and bridleways. Next slide, please. And then other sort of shared, more intimate sort of shared surface streets, quieter sort of residential spaces, and then also the sort of frontages, how they would relate to open space. Next slide, please. Now just sort of moving on to some of the issues that are planning issues in connection with this application. Transport is one of the main sort of issues. We've been the applicants have been trying to liaise with county council to address some of the concerns that were initially raised, and now county council have issued an updated response raising no objection to the proposals. There's been sort of updates to the main sort of site access. You can see here, this is the entrance to Hare Street Road, and the proposals, the access sort of proposals at this point have been updated with a crossing point provided, bus stops on the north and south side of the street adjacent to the medical centre, and footways on the north and south side of Hare Street Road heading westwards towards the centre of Buntingford. Next slide, please. And the proposal is to extend a footway all the way along the northern edge of Hare Street Road, so that it would connect with the existing footway at the entrance to Pipkin Drive, which you can see sort of on the left-hand side of that plan. Next slide, please. And then the at the other end of the site, sort of heading eastwards, the proposal is to provide a new gateway feature, which would then indicate a reduction in speed limit as you sort of enter into the urban area, and that sort of move from where it currently is further to the further to the east. Next slide, please. And then just shows the sort of access arrangements into the site and into the medical centre. Next slide, please. So there's been a number of sort of comments around the accessibility of the site, the suitability for housing, both for the site itself, the sort of local characteristics of the site, but also the wider context in Buntingford. This plan just shows the site connections with the wider area. This has been sort of subject to a number of discussions with the county council about how accessible the site is for walking and cycling. And so there's a number of sort of options to link into the site, to walk or cycle to the site from the centre of Buntingford, either along Hare Street Road or the Causeway, or the proposal also for a new access point into Howard Lane, which could then sort of link in with either the Causeway or Hare Street Road again. And then there's also another option of a sort of route through the Wheatley development to the south, which would then sort of lead towards the south side of Buntingford, if that was the direction of travel that was sought. Next slide, please. And so sort of as a result of these connections, this plan just shows sort of where it's possible to get to within a sort of 10-minute walking distance or a 20-minute walking distance. That's the purple areas. So that's the dark purple is 800 meters, which is roughly about 10 minutes walking distance. So that kind of shows you the centre of Buntingford is accessible within that kind of travel distance and time, and then most of the remaining sort of urban areas in Buntingford are also within that sort of lighter purple isochrome, which is the 1,600 meters, so approximately 20 minutes sort of walking distance. Then the blue shows sort of cycling distances. So the light blue is a 5 kilometre cycling distance, which is a roughly 15 minutes cycle ride, depending on sort of how fit or fast you go. And then the darker blue is 8 kilometres distance, so could be sort of half an hour cycle distance. This kind of information does show that large areas of Buntingford are accessible by active travel modes, including walking. Next slide, please. This plan just shows it in a little bit more detail, the kind of range of services accessible within 800 metre walking distance from the site. Next slide, please. So, I mean, yeah, those are the sort of, set out the kind of transport connections for the site. The committee report does expand on that in more detail on the sort of suitability of the site for both the medical centre and housing. I'm sure we can sort of come back to that in terms of questions, those various aspects of the report around transport. Moving on, another one of the sort of big issues with the application is the landscape impact. So, currently the site is within the rural area beyond the green belt. Planning policies recognise the sort of intrinsic value of the rural area and generally aim to restrict development. So the site sort of going beyond that and having an urbanising effect on that edge of Buntingford. This is a sort of extract from the landscape visual impact assessment, but it also shows some of the district council's own landscape character assessment, and it sort of shows the different character areas of landscape around the site. So the red areas are within the sort of the Rib Valley, sort of the lower level where it goes down towards the river, and then with the the blue area, sorry, green area is identified as where the site is, which is the Widial Plateau, the sort of higher level, higher ground, and so potentially more sort of visible. Next slide, please. The landscape visual impact assessment does then look at where the site will be visible from, and that sort of blue, the darker blue, is a sort of theoretical zone of visibility, and from that point a number of views have been selected in consultation with officers to where the development is likely to be most visible, in order to assess the kind of visual impact that would arise. Next slide, please. I've just included some views here of showing where the highest level of visual impact would be, and those are generally sort of in closer proximity to the site. This is the view from Hare Street Road. So clearly, you know, currently it's a field, and with development there would be quite a change to that landscape character at that point. The landscape visual impact assessment, well, our landscape officer advice is that the landscape impact would generally be in the significant reducing to moderate in the longer term, over 15 years, when the landscaping becomes more established. Next slide, please. This is another view where the development will be more visible. There will be more impact from. I think Hare Street Road is sort of just beyond that, kind of where that tree, where there's not that line of trees are, with the development behind that. Next slide, please. And then this is a view from the east, higher ground, and you can see the kind of extent of the site as indicated, and the development will be on that sort of down slope just behind that line of that tree, sort of hedge line there. So again, visible. There will be impact in this view again. Next slide, please. So yeah, I mean, as identified in the report, this is a negative aspect of the proposals. There would be some harm to landscape character, and we've considered that as part of our planning balance in that sort of section of the report towards the end. Then moving on, another issue is around drainage. So this is the drainage strategy for the development. So you've got a kind of a site where the highest point is where that bridleway is. So there's two sort of natural catchment areas for drainage, one to the west, one to the east. And so the western surface water drainage will drain to the attenuation basin and then into the existing surface water network within the adjacent development, residential development, and then further on into the drainage network, surface water network, and then to the river. The eastern catchment would drain to the attenuation basin on the eastern side of the site, and then there would be a connection to a drainage ditch further to the east, with an easement over the adjoining field. And the foul water drainage would be collected, and you can sort of see towards the sort of bottom right hand corner of the site, there's a red line. There'll be that's sort of low point where foul water drainage will be then pumped. Then you can see a red line back connecting down towards down Hare Street Road towards Pipkin Drive, where it would then connect with the existing sort of foul water sewerage network. The surface water drainage has been subject to a lot of discussion with the LLFA, who are satisfied with that the application is not going to result in sort of undue surface water flood risk, and they've withdrawn their objection subject to conditions. And the in terms of foul water drainage, the Thames Water have commented on commented as part of the pre-application consultation with the applicants that there is sufficient capacity to meet their requirement, for it to be accommodated within the existing network. But there will need to be further consultation between the applicant and Thames Water at the point that the development comes forward to make sure that that would be in place. Next slide, please. Finally, there would be some tree loss, as I sort of touched on before. This is the tree protection plan, so it just sort of shows where the trees are that would be removed. They're generally identified to be less high quality category sort of C trees, and there would be new tree planting within the development, and so the council's landscape and tree officer considers that the sort of tree loss aspect is acceptable. Next slide, please. And this just showed that in sort of a little bit more detail, areas of tree and hedgerow that would be removed. Next slide, please. And then just moving on to the planning balance. So this is a sort of critical aspect of assessing the application. The site is the council currently can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The MPPF requires that a balancing exercise is undertaken in order to balance the positive aspects of the development against any harms that have arisen, and unless the harms demonstrably outweigh the benefits, then planning permission should be granted if it's providing new housing in order to bring forward housing to meet the council's 5-year housing land supply. So this is an extract from the committee report, and so you can see the main sort of most significant positive weight benefits from the development are arising around the new housing, affordable housing, custom built housing as well, and also the provision of a new medical centre. There are also further benefits in terms of, sort of financial contributions to public transport and things like that would be of wider public benefit, biodiversity net gain, and also socio-economic benefits from construction employment phases. Next slide, please. The harms that we've identified in the committee report, there would be harm to the landscape character of the area. There is conflict with policy GBR2 in terms of the rural area beyond the green belt, although as required by the MPPF, if there is no 5-year housing land supply, these sort of policies should be given less weight in the decision making, will be considered out of date in terms of the MPPF, with the priority being to provide housing to meet the required needs. There are some other harms we've identified as well in terms of loss of agricultural land, less than substantial harm to the setting of Alswick Hall, and also increased vehicle trips from housing within Buntingford. And you can see in our summary section of the report, we do sort of weigh all these up, but the officer conclusion is that the public benefits do significantly outweigh the harms in this case, and hence the recommendation for approval. Just moving on, I would just draw members' attention to the late representations update sheet. We've got a further comment from CPRE raising some comments about the weighting that have been attached in as part of our balancing exercise. And our view is, officer view is that is addressed in the committee report. There's some difference of opinion there, but our position is as set out in the report. Further comment from Sawbridge were Swifts. I won't go into that in detail. There's been a few sort of updates, amendments to the report. There was an error in the report around the biodiversity net gain. It should be 20% rather than 13%. So that's just been corrected. There was also an error in the wording of paragraph 9.36 with regard to sewerage, and that should be that paragraph should read as officers having as such, officers consider that the foul drainage strategy is acceptable and there are no grounds for refusal of the planning application in relation to this issue. Apologies, it's got that round the wrong way. No, oh, sorry, 9.38, sorry. And then there's been some updates to the conditions. Main condition that's been subject to change is condition 7. And the purpose of this condition is to set the sort of trigger point for delivery of the medical centre. We've been in discussions with the applicants around this, and the intention is that the medical centre comes forward with the first phase of housing and the vehicle access into the site. And so the wording of this, it just introduces some more flexibility to the delivery of that, so that maybe a small number of houses might happen will be occupied before the medical centre, but with the with the general approach being that they would be developed in conjunction. The medical centre would come forward in conjunction with the first phase of housing, so sort of at the same time. There were some other changes, sort of detailed wording of some of the other conditions that doesn't probably doesn't need to be expanded on too much. A couple of additional heads of term to the Section 106 agreement. So alongside that tweak to condition 7 with regard to the phasing, it just sort of allows the flexibility to change subject to the phasing plan that would be agreed by condition 8. But we've also introduced an additional head of term to say that the medical centre would be delivered in conjunction with the first phase of the residential development, to make that clear. That and also an additional head of term with regard to highways, trees. So those trees on the frontage where it stretches down to Pipkin Drive, that's currently highways land. They're sort of highways trees. So we've introduced in consultation with County Council, there need to be a process of assessment of those trees and then compensation, either planting or financial contribution to mitigate any losses that will occur. All the other matters are as set out in the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so next I'm going to invite yes, together. So Mr. Stephen Baker and Councillor Jeff Jones. Yeah. So, yes, I've got my list here, Stephen Baker and Jeff Jones. It's against first. No.
Is the objecting speakers go first?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thanks for allowing me to address the committee. I'll be very brief. I've had 3 points on this application for you to consider. This proposal, point 1, this proposal in front of you lies outside the town development boundary and is not an allocated development site in a district or neighbourhood plan. Site location is in an elevated, remote part of the town, requiring predominantly access by private car, making it an unsustainable location, particularly for the doctor's surgery, which requires access for all, and therefore contrary to HCC's LTP4, which gives priority to pedestrians and cyclists. Point 2, residents and I believe that they are being held to ransom by Taylor Wimpey to accept 200 homes in exchange for a new doctor's surgery in an inappropriate location. Taylor Wimpey claimed that there are no other options for a new surgery within the town, which is factually incorrect. I'm led to believe that the existing surgery lease has been taken over by a new freeholder who has offered to extend their lease considerably and allow expansion of the current site if required. If members are minded to approve the application, concern should be given to the future of the doctor's surgery, which currently is being gifted freehold to the surgery practice for doctors. If they choose in the future to sell the site for whatever reason, the town would be in danger of losing this facility. This could be secured by gifting the freehold to a local charity or the town council, and a peppercorn lease arrangement to the doctor's practice. This would therefore require further discussion to be had with Taylor Wimpey, and I guess it requires a deferment of the application. My final point, point 3, I was involved in the planning appeal back in 2014 for the 2 developments, the Taylor Wimpey and Wheatley sites adjacent to the proposed site, which members would have seen on their site visit. I clearly remember the appeal inspector, Mr. Middleton, having concerns with the effect that those particular developments would have on the Whittiall Plateau, and it should be protected. He concluded that those two developments would not have a detrimental effect on the plateau, with the provision of a tree-line boundary to the east, but would not want to see further development to the east towards the Whittiall Plateau Ridge, which is what the development in front of you is proposing. So therefore, I would request members to refuse this application as inappropriate development, or at least defer a decision until further work on ownership of doctor's surgery and other items are undertaken. Handing over to Steve.
The landscape and visual impact. The proposed development would result in unacceptable landscape and visual impacts on Buntingford's setting and the landscape of the Whittiall Plateau. It therefore conflicts with the neighbourhood and district plan. The development would cause irreversible harm to the setting of Buntingford, currently protected by these policies, and especially with a big medical facility on the top of the plateau, along with a housing estate, out of the Rib Valley and into the adjacent valley. Your own landscapes officer opinion was the same, as set out in his advice to you in May, not referred to in your officer's report, but on your website. Some of his quotes: the site comprises a significant part of the countryside and rural landscape around Buntingford. This would result in the permanent loss of an open rural landscape in a location that is visually sensitive to changes. The highest level of impact will be at completion due to the introduction of built form into the rural area and the extension of the settlement, which will be highly apparent in the local context. The magnitude of impact will be high from a number of viewpoints, the size and scale of change, The duration of the impact would be long-term, and the reversal of the impact is not likely, and in practical terms would not be achievable. He finished by saying objection, and he noted conflicts with several policies, particularly mentioning ES1, which talks about the setting of Buntingford, the Rib Valley setting of Buntingford, and notes the harmful effect on the landscape of taking development out of the Rib Valley. HD2 of the plan also seeks to preserve the value of the Rib Valley setting. He also said a substantial amount of built form would be introduced and the resultant domestic creep would erode the spaciousness, diminishing this key characteristic to an unacceptable degree. Recent advice to you from the external consultants agrees with that landscape officer's report, concluding, from a landscape point of view, the application cannot be supported. The development is similar in setting on the Whittiall Plateau to the Wheatley Homes application to the south that you refused for similar reasons to those that apply here. And the officer's report makes no mention of that or to the appeal decision last October for the site immediately to the south, despite a lack of 5-year supply at that time, because amongst other reasons, the increasing urbanising effect, which would conflict with the predominantly rural landscape of the surrounding area. The current proposals are clearly contrary to development plan policies, and they would cause major permanent harm. For consistency of decision taking, surely these material considerations must weigh heavily in the planning balance against the proposals and justify the refusal of the application before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so next we have Mr. Stephen Koski on behalf of Taylor Wimpey and Kumar Mukherjee on behalf of the GP surgery. And again, you're sharing 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of Taylor Wimpey and the Buntingford and Puckeridge Medical Practice. We're pleased to bring forward a mixed-use development on land north of Hare Street Road to address two critical needs: an urgently needed new doctor's surgery to replace the impending loss of the existing facility, and up to 200 new homes, 40% of which will be affordable to meet local housing needs. Over the past 10 years, the medical practice partners have explored a range of options for the delivery of a new surgery and have worked with both the town and county councils to consider several sites in the town, as Mr. Mukherjee will explain further in a few minutes. The chosen application site is located in a highly sustainable location at the eastern edge of Buntingford and offers a logical extension to the town, making it ideal for the delivery of a new surgery to accommodate the anticipated 15 to 30% increase in patients projected to join the medical practice waiting list over the next local plan period. Alongside the new surgery, the site provides the opportunity to deliver much needed market and affordable housing across the district to contribute to the council's 5-year housing land supply, which currently stands at less than 4.5 years. The applicant has engaged extensively with key stakeholders, the community, the Hertfordshire Design Review Panel and the Development Management Forum to develop the scheme. We have responded to create a scheme that is sustainable, practical and responsive to the site surroundings and which provides future flexibility. The new surgery will be delivered as part of the first phase of development in line with Taylor Wimpey's infrastructure-led approach. The new surgery has been sensitively designed to reflect the local area, including a barn-style building with a main entrance fronting onto a village green, with a BREEAM Excellent rating. The associated new homes will be built to high sustainability standards, incorporating a wide range of new technologies designed to increase energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse emissions. Each house will be zero carbon ready, and a mix of housing types will be delivered, including provision for self-build and custom-built homes. We also propose to enhance connectivity between the site and the town centre. This will be achieved through upgrades to existing footpaths and cycle links, as well as the addition of a new bus stop on Hare Street Road. Additionally, over 6 hectares of new public open space will be provided to deliver a biodiversity net gain of at least 20%. To address water management, sustainable urban drainage will be incorporated into the layout with attenuation basins and the potential for rainwater harvesting. The application represents the best opportunity to address the urgent requirement for a new surgery in a sustainable and accessible location, together with much needed new market and affordable homes with significant new public open space. This is also a development designed for the future with flexibility to meet growing patient demand. The final design is the product of extensive collaboration between the applicant, members of the community and stakeholders, which we trust you can support.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Mukherjee and I'm one of the partners at the Buntingford Surgery. I'd like to speak about missed opportunity. 10 years ago, we had a chance to build the surgery to cater for our growing population and this wasn't taken up. Current building is designed to accommodate a capacity for about 6,400 patients, and we have a population exceeding 11,000 at the moment. 1,800 patients aren't able to come to our surgery at the moment, and they go to the Puckeridge site simply because of capacity restrictions. Over the next 2 to 3 years, we expect the Buntingford Medical Centre to accommodate around 13 to 14,000 patients simply because of the mass population that's coming here. Overall, over the next couple of years, we're expecting a 15 to 30% increase in list size due to more developments. I think it's therefore imperative we act now to develop a larger, bigger, purpose-built building. Since 2014, we've worked with the Town Council, the County Council, Jeff Jones and the ICB to explore potential and developments of the existing site and new sites. We've also gathered feedback from our patient community to understand what their expectations and needs were. As part of the process, we commissioned the GP premises specialist to evaluate several alternatives to identify the best path forward. None of the alternatives, including our own site, were plausible based on location, size, ability to expand within the existing site, and financial feasibility, as us, the partners, will be funding this project. This project meets our needs with the capacity to support a surgery twice the size of our existing facility, space to offer ancillary medical services, and room for future expansion, positioning us to serve the community for decades to come. We hope a covenant will be put in place on this medical practice so that this building can use solely for medical services in the future beyond our time. We carried out the survey in 2023, and there was one key message from patients: more appointments. They want more doctors, more staff, more nurses, more services, a brighter facility, more parking. And this unit meets all of those requirements. Hence, our surgery is really designed around our patients' need in mind. This new facility allows us to expand as demand dictates, support recruitment and well-being for staff, and allows us to accept trainees, strengthening the future of healthcare in Buntingford and the wider catchment area. We will have more scope to provide dedicated areas such as imaging facilities and fundamentally increase primary care capacity. This is in line with the government shift. So I would like to take you back to missed opportunities. Here we have a second chance to bring about much needed healthcare infrastructure. One, we really can't afford to say no under the current climate. I do fully believe this proposal gives us the best chance.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Yep.
Thank
So
you.
next up is Duncan Wallace from Buntingford Town Council, and you get 6 minutes, should you require it.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Duncan Wallace and I represent Buntingford Town Council. Buntingford Town Council are disappointed that this substantive application has come before committee at what it considers to be a premature stage when, as indicated in the officer's report and recommendations, aspects remain unanswered or lack detail and clarity. Some of these concerns will be presented to you in more detail later by other speakers, but the Town Council feel that to demonstrate due diligence towards its responsibilities, the committee should seek to ensure it is availed of all information to best equip members to determine such important decisions in an objective and informed manner. Buntingford has an adopted current neighbourhood plan. East Herts District Council have an adopted current district plan. This application is in direct conflict with many policies contained within both documents, again as the officer's report alludes. The site lies outside the town's identified settlement boundary on open productive farmland, which afford cherished views to the east of the town. The current situation regarding the 5-year housing supply, whilst important, should not and cannot surely be the only consideration if administrations are to manage growth responsibly and create sustainable communities for future generations. And we are mindful of the guidance contained within the NPPF, which advocates granting permission unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. This application prompted much public outcry when first proposed. As a result, the Town Council facilitated a public meeting back on the 4th of October 2023, which was attended in significant numbers, where those from our community were afforded opportunity to voice both concerns and support. Although not a common occurrence in our town, it had the greatest number of attendees at any such meeting that I can recall. The East Herts District Council's planning portal has 731 objections to the proposals, with only a further 33 in support related to this application. The mandate given by our community has been unequivocally clear in that despite the potential of a new health facility, the benefit does not outweigh what many see as significant negative factors. Indeed, many see the health centre provision as an inducement to securing the residential aspect of the application, which they perceive in isolation to be weak. We note the comments in the officer's report regarding the recent Vistry appeal decision on land to the west of the town, but wish to remind the committee that this is a separate application and should be assessed on its own merits. This application is geographically alternate to that of the recent Vistry appeal site. This site cannot be viewed as natural infill, bounded by a major road to one side and established development to the other. Indeed, should members feel that weight should be given to previous recent decisions, then we draw their attention to the appeal decision dated the 2nd of October 2023 by Planning Inspector Benjamin Clark. This related to land on the same side of town as the current application, with the same outlook to the south side of Hare Street Road, a mere stone's throw from the current proposed site. In dismissing that appeal, he cited one of his 3 main issues in arriving at his decision being the effect of the development upon the character and appearance of the surrounding area. During that appeal, a 5-year housing supply could not be demonstrated also. But, importantly, he was of the opinion that when applying the tilted balance process, the adverse impact would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. It is our opinion that the report and recommendations in its current form does not provide a comprehensive, balanced officer consideration. The lack of detail and clarity give a clear indication that members cannot be sure that significant harm to the character and appearance of the surrounding area will not arise should permission be granted. Some generic identified areas of this application which we feel lack clarity or appear currently unresolved are many aspects concerning the provision of the health centre, including support from the ICB. The landscape and visual impact aspect you've already heard. Then there is the sustainability of the site, and importantly, the management of surface and foul water. As a result of the issues highlighted, in particular the cited lack of detail and clarity, we strongly urge members to reject the proposal as it is presented currently. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And next we have the district ward councillors. For Buntingford, we've got Councillor Vicky Burt. Do you want to go first? And now, Councillor, welcome. We haven't heard from you. Did I? I don't think so. When did you request to speak to me? Was there a request put into me? I think I was. Well, it's at my discretion, so I'll allow it. Who wants to go first? Councillor Wilcombe.
Thank you very much. Yes, I want to speak today. Today is the International Day of Kindness, and I hope you will be kind to the residents of Buntingford, who, as the Mayor just alluded, are viscerally against this proposal. When I first joined this council, we made quite a big deal of the fact that we would be a listening council. And so I've made it my business to listen to the objections of the residents who've been in touch with me. But before I talk about what they've told me, I really would also like to extend the idea of an International Day of Kindness to the planning officers who worked incredibly hard on the Vistry appeal, which sadly the Secretary of State went against them on. And I cannot imagine how gut-wrenching that must have been for them. But this, as the Mayor said, is a very different proposal. It doesn't run up against the natural boundary of the A10 bypass. It extends Buntingford towards another natural boundary, which is Hare Street, destroying many of the green fields. And I'm afraid some of the residents' notes to me have been not in the language that I can repeat in this chamber, pointing out that what EHDC is trying to do to the greenfield at Buntingford is similar to what President Trump has done to democracy in America. That's not what you want to hear tonight. You want to hear the intelligent responses that I've had from informed citizens who've taken the trouble, like we have, to really look into this issue. And as the Mayor alluded, last year at this public meeting, I asked the meeting, if there was no new homes, would you accept a medical centre up at the top of the hill on the edge of the town? How many would you like to see the medical centre moved there? 100% of them raised their hands and said no. That is the kind of opposition that I'm finding to this plan. Clause 625 was a key source of objection. I was asked, how can officers not challenge Thames Water's statement in that they have no objection to this planning application? Don't they know that Thames Water has just spent 12 million refurbishing the Buntingford sewage work, bringing it up to be able to handle 7,725 residents? We already have over 8,000 residents, and Vistry in this new proposal would take it to nearly 10,000. Can't they do the math? The figures just don't add up. Also, in the clause that follows, we learn that Affinity Water didn't even comment. Why not? We know we have a fresh water supply to the southeast. How can we expect it to approve a decision when the developers can't even confirm that the new houses they propose to build can actually be supplied with water? And we know that residents don't want that medical centre to be out of town. Every single resident I heard from and talked to can't understand why it can't remain where it is. And although, you know, Dr. Mukherjee gave very, very lovely ideas of what could be expanded, what they hear is that actually the doctors will own a new medical centre worth a great deal of money at almost no cost to them. And also, as this report admits, the ICB has not accepted the deal. And so we have supported our town councillors looking at how we can expand the existing medical centre, talking to the new owners and talking to the ICB, because it's not, we're not about to lose it. It's still there for us, and we could look at developing that again. And that's another reason why tonight, I don't think you can make a decision. All of us feel that the report before you tonight is full of holes. And so therefore, if you really do accept that you're going to be a listening council, please listen to us and to the residents of Buntingford and recognize that this is a decision you cannot take approved tonight, but you either have to refuse or defer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcombe. Who's next? Councillor Burt.
The development goes against policies in the district plan, the MPPF and the neighbourhood plan. Within the report, little or no weight has been given to conflicts with policies in these three plans. District plan recognised that before 2011, a substantial amount of building had already taken place in Buntingford. See page 29 of the report. The district plan stated that only existing sites that already had permission should be built and no new allocation should take place. To give context to the scale of development in the town, over 1,500 homes have been given permission since 2011. Between 2019 and 2024, Buntingford has lost many of its council-run facilities, and it must also be noted that Edmondsbury Middle School and Freeman College, the town secondary school, are both oversubscribed in all year groups and have waiting lists. HTC Highway Authority has stated that the target for 50% of journeys within a town should be walked or cycled. The report omits any comment on the failure of this application to meet this target, accepting a target of just 33%. Note, this is just a target and not even a requirement of the proposal. Within the report, there is no discussion of the sustainability and accessibility implications of siting the development in a busy classified road at the top of a steep hill on the edge of the town. The bus network across the town is poor, and people using the medical centre cannot be expected to rely upon the service to take them from one area of the town to another. It was interesting to hear that the LFFA is satisfied with the drainage and sewage issues as a situation in Buntingford, and as the numbers contradict this suggestion. To add more to this, to the context, on the paragraph on page 18, paragraph 1.6.12. To add more to this, the foul water drainage system on the proposed development depends on gravity for the western section and a pumping station for the eastern section. These ultimately feed into foul water network and on the adjacent side to the west. This site relies on a pumping station that pumps foul water into a manhole on Hare Street Road, which feeds into the already stressed network feeding the Thames Water Sewage Treatment Works that does not have sufficient capacity. A number of residents have experienced serious flooding, and sewage has flooded into their homes. Along with this, sewage has come up from the drainage system on the pathway adjacent to Aspenden Road, bringing up sanitary towels and loo paper. This is the reality of an insufficient sewage system. These issues are due to the fact that the whole town's sewage network ends up in the sewage treatment works in Aspenden Road. There was an upgrade completed recently in May 2024, but it is understood that this upgrade has increased capacity to serve a population of 7,725 by 2026. We would advise that the population at the 2021 census was 7,900, and it is estimated that at present the population served by this sewage treatment is 8,150. Parts of the network are combined sewage, which means that not only do the pipes carry foul water, but also surface water, which effectively means in periods of reasonably heavy rainfall, which are becoming more frequent, these pipes can be overwhelmed and cause flooding by either backing up or by release via the manhole. There is no evidence that any calculations have been carried out to ensure that the pumping station on the adjacent side is capable of dealing with a 137.5% increase in foul water handling that would be likely. The surface foul water sewage treatment system is already known to be insufficient to accommodate this development, and Thames Water has already stated that the planned improvements do not have the capacity to meet the needs of the current population. There is no programme proposals to increase foul water sewage treatment capacity or any costed agreement to do so between the applicant and Thames Water. It is therefore uncertain if any upgrades will take place, and if upgraded enough, new capacity can be created to cope with the additional requirements. As you have already heard, the current sewage treatment works cannot cope with the current number of residents, let alone the added effluent from this proposed development. We have just heard that the LLFA are now satisfied with the drainage and sewage system. With the strength of the concerns from the LLFA in the report and the insufficient capacity of the current sewage system, I wonder how it is that now these concerns can now so easily be removed. In line with the advice from the LFA in the actual report, we ask that this application is refused or at least deferred in order for more information to be provided on this serious issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And now councillor Nichols.
Thank you. I'm concentrating on the medical centre, referencing some visual impacts also referred to by Steve Baker. The Herts and West Essex Integrated Care Board, the statutory NHS organisation that plans and manages health services for local populations, states that whilst it is a supportive in principle of the GP relocating its current practice, this is subject to a business appraisal of all options, including other possible relocation opportunities. This planning application is therefore considered to be premature, advancing ahead of the NHS's own business case assessments, scrutiny and due diligence processes. The ICB's own assessment of the size of medical facility required for Buntingford points to a need for a smaller facility and footprint with less parking spaces. The size of the facility proposed is yet to be justified in a business case and supported by the ICB. An NHS primary care centre cannot run without the full support of the ICB. The GP practice argue that the current site is unfit for purpose and that there is no other suitable sites available. According to the ICB, the practice has an exclusivity agreement with Taylor Wimpey, which prohibits them from speaking with other site promoters and developers. We are aware of other sites, but it's the exclusivity agreement that prohibits the practice from giving any consideration to these. The owner of the existing medical practice site has told me that he offers to work with the ICB to keep it as a medical centre, with the option of a 2-storey building which would double the current site's floor space. Another possibility is the Vistry site, which has outline permission for 350 houses and scope for a medical centre. A medical centre and housing are not included in the list of permitted development in District Plan Policy GBR2. The site outside of Buntingford's existing urban area isn't in accordance with policy DPS2, and Buntingford's not included in the list of towns for possible urban extensions. There's conflict with policy TRA1, which states development should primarily be located in places that enable sustainable journeys to be made to key services and facilities. It's questionable whether this is achievable with the proposed location on the edge of town at the top of a steep hill. The office report says that the new building is proposed to be delivered at an early stage prior to first occupation of any residential units. A condition is proposed to require this. Doubt about the deliverability of the medical centre also places doubt on the deliverability of the housing element as part of East Hert's 5-year housing supply. The statement in the office report that it is considered that the site will be sufficiently accessible for pedestrians and cyclists and public transport, accord with the accessibility requirements of policy CFLR9, goes against the feelings of local residents, and it doesn't take into account the steepness of the hill leading to the proposed site on the outskirts of the town. The report also states that the panel supported the barn vernacular design approach, but questioned whether the building should be celebrated further as a community feature and have more prominence when viewed from Hare Street Road. The design has been revised with the projecting wing increased in height. Officers considered it would also form an attractive, welcoming feature at the entrance to the site in accordance with policy DES4. But this contravenes the principles of policy ES1, which states that development proposals should be appropriate to maintain the Rib Valley setting of the BCA. Development on the fringes of Buntingford, which extends onto the higher ground surrounding the Rib Valley, could have harmful effect on the landscape. Policy HD2 says all new housing development should be sensitive to landscape and be of a height that doesn't impact adversely on views from the surrounding countryside. When permission was granted for the Taylor Wimpey site to the west of this site, the inspector specifically limited the height of houses that otherwise could impact on the wider landscape to the east, and also required that there was now the proposed the site that is now the proposed medical site would be retained for agricultural use, with this stated reason to minimise the landscape and visual impact of the development in accordance with the policies of the East Herts local plan. His opinion was that the established belt of trees could act as a logical eastern boundary to built development, preventing its breakdown onto the higher parts of the plateau. Paragraph 50 of his report. With the lack of adequate information, including on housing numbers and tenure, policy conflicts, the harm that will be caused to Buntingford's setting and landscape, inadequate drainage, unsustainability, and undeliverable, unnecessarily large medical centre in the wrong place, and the remaining uncertainty that surrounds many of the key issues, we urge you to refuse this planning application.
Thank you, councillor Nichols. All right, members, it's time for the debate. I would like us to work through this in a logical manner, if you will. Starting with the principle of housing development. Councillor Copley.
Yeah, in relation to that, I don't know if this comes into your logical argument, but would we first just hear from the officers in relation to, obviously, DPPF paragraph 11D is obviously discussing the overall principle of like the district plan and other neighbourhood plans and how that fits in with the development. And I suppose I'm just struggling to understand here, if we didn't have the tilted balance, I mean, is basically the tilted balance the only reason we are overriding NPPF paragraph 11D here, or could we just run through any other reasons which might go into why we are considering a site which does not have a district plan supporting housing being developed there? Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the tilted balance is a big consideration. I think it's difficult to say what the recommendation would be if the tilted balance wasn't engaged. You know, we haven't got, you know, we haven't done that sort of assessment, hadn't got to that point. So I don't think we can say really what the outcome would be if paragraph 11D wasn't relevant. But, you know, I think, but it is relevant in terms of, you know, the Vistry appeal has made it clear to us that, you know, that there is no 5-year housing land supply and that tilted balance is engaged. So we've assessed it on that basis. I think, you know, it is a big factor in the balancing exercise, particularly in terms of what the tilted balance does in highlighting that some policies are out of date as such, or, you know, have less weight. So, you know, in particular policies GBR2, which is the rural area beyond the Greenbelt policy. It's, you know, in that tilted balance scenario, those policies have to be given less weight in the balance, really.
Sort of follow up on that one.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's just to help you out more as well. When you're not applying a tilted balance, when the council's got 5-year supply, when we've got an up-to-date local plan, when the policies are all applied full weight, what's the job of the committee to do? And the decision maker is to assess the application against the development plan, unless there are material circumstances that consider otherwise. And so when you assess a planning application on the basis of policy that doesn't comply with a number of policies, that would give you a strong indication that the development may be unacceptable. It's not to say it will be unacceptable every time, but it gives you a strong indication that the development doesn't comply with policy, ends up, you know, being a quite high bar in terms of being able to pass it. But the moment the tilted balance applies, what the decision maker is being asked to do then is to weigh up on a balance the positives and the negatives. And so it isn't just simply a case of looking at the policy and does it comply with the policy, yes or no. And so it's a more nuanced case of looking at the negatives and the positives. And so the application that's put before you today is considered on the tilted balance because the council's most important policies in the neighbourhood plan, the district plan, are out of date. So all the policies about housing supply and GBR2 development in the rural area beyond the green belt, the neighbourhood plan policies, which relate to sort of landscape character and settlement boundaries, they have to be applied with less weight, less than full weight in this judgment. And of course, it is a judgment that you make as a planning committee, how much weight to attach to that. We've got the recent case from the appeal, which set out pretty solidly what weight to be given for a large development outside the settlement boundary. And in the report, as you would have read, that identifies the position that officers taken. So hopefully that gives you a bit of extra information on the sorts of
I think that was a bit more helpful, because I suppose I'm just struggling here to understand why we've got plans which are saying don't build there, and then obviously trying to understand the thought process in terms of going against those, obviously talking about the tilted balance here, and just I suppose some other factors which I'm sure we'll go through, but let everybody else talk for a minute. Thanks.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of going on from what you've just said, I understand the tilted balance, but the tilted balance is in favour of sustainable development, and I'm not 100% convinced this is sustainable development, so I need to be convinced of that. Can I go on to talk about the loss of agricultural land? Oh, I will anyway.
Yeah, go on.
And the site comprises best, most versatile agricultural land. The loss of agricultural land in this report is given a limited negative weight, and I would suggest that that is wrong. That this is far greater concern. The loss of that best, most versatile agricultural land is going. So I need to be convinced of that as well. The other thing that I'm worried about is if GBR2 has less weight now, it not only affects this site, it affects the whole of our district. And that is a very, very serious concern for me. Thank you.
Councillor Dunlop.
I'd like to pick up where Councillor Devonshire talked about loss of agricultural land. I've extrapolated that through to the loss of food produced in the UK, and worked out that if the crops that were grown there in the last harvest, which were corn and wheat, were no longer available because the land was no longer available, then we would be short of 162,000 loaves of bread each year, and we would be short of 120 tons of sweet corn. So I'd like to know where that food's coming from.
Councillor Holt, and then.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on a point that Councillor Devonshire made regarding it being a sustainable location and that it not being in the district plan, and I think that's now one of our key considerations. And to put on a point as well that's been made quite a lot in the report, but also has been mentioned regarding the site and the other site in Buntingford that was recently granted on appeal, and really highlighting, from my understanding, what others said, and also having visited and been around the site, that they are fundamentally different sites. The one on appeal was very much which could be considered would be infill, regarding the bypass of Buntingford, going around Buntingford, and then the infilling of land surrounded by either sides by a housing estates, and then also by an A road, whilst this is a very different site, completely other end of Buntingford, cannot be considered infill, surrounded by other agricultural land. And regarding the sustainability of the site, I think that I'd also need to be convinced that actually this is a sustainable location, and actually that those arguments regarding the appeal decision and the nature of the sites, that they're so fundamentally different, that for me that doesn't carry a huge amount of weight. I've got other points, but as we are sticking to that strict schedule, I'll move on and come back to those later on.
Councillor Carter.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the explanation of how the tilted balance works in that very full report. I just want to make, to begin with, just one point about the agricultural land which would be lost as well, which is that I understand that Natural England is normally consulted if there is likely to be loss of agricultural land, particularly if it's not in accordance with an approved development plan. So I think it would be helpful, and that would give an assessment. They would be able to give an assessment of the effect of the loss of that agricultural land. So I wonder if we could request that.
Councillor Estop.
Just about the principle of housing and picking up what Councillor Copley said about tilted balance. It's not an allocated site and there's no master plan, so it's against policy. And in the report, there's a lot of reference to the east of the A10 inspector's decision, a lot of italic text. And that has led largely, you know, we've accepted the 5-year land supply not so great, and that's led to the relevance of having a tilted balance consideration. But it feels to me as if it's not being tilted. We are dropping the local plan. You know, the local plan is being described as out of date, and therefore we're using the basis of that inspector's decision to lose the plan. When we look at the tilted balance analysis in the report, I don't feel comfortable with that particularly. A lot of weight is given to the fact that housing is going to be delivered. And then I think it's double counting to say that there's going to be affordable when that's just policy. And I think it's unfair to include the medical centre as a heavy weighting, because that's nothing to do with housing. So there's a problem with the weighting. Then the policies for Buntingford. Strategically, the plan says, so this is not, you know, I think there are things that should be in the tilted balance weighting which are not there. And the key one is the policies for Buntingford, which is a minor town centre with no railway, and the strategy is to mitigate impacts based on the existing infrastructure. So, you know, the policy is very clearly that town is not quite ready for growth. If it's going to be grown, there has to be retail, there has to be more employment, there has to be other services, and that needs to be in the tilted balance. And then the other thing about tilted balance is that on the basis of that inspector's report, she didn't accept the 5-year land supply could count developments that have got planning permission, that are allocated, that are in progress. How can this leapfrog those 3 or 4 sites where work is taking place in a Section 106 agreement?
Okay, I'm going to bring in some officers. First of all, just a point of clarity, because the medical centre is in the application, it's relevant that we consider it. But I'll bring in because I think that we've raised a few points that I thought officers might want to respond to.
Yeah, sure. I think there's some points about the sort of sustainable location, which perhaps I might be best to sort of cover a bit later. Maybe if we sort of, it still seems to be a lot of like kind of questions around tilted balance and weighting, and so maybe if I sort of focus on that for now. I mean, in terms of the planning balance, it is a judgment. Different, you know, whether it's an applicant or the council officers or planning inspectors approach them and come, you know, and allocate sort of different weights sometimes, and that's what has to be debated in the inquiry. But I think, you know, we try to, in our sort of weighting exercise, we try to have regard to the weights that inspectors attach to similar developments in, you know, with some similarities. So, for instance, in terms of, you know, medical centres, we have seen appeal decisions for other medical centres, and inspectors do attach considerable weight to those. So we feel that, you know, to not do that would be, you know, not something we'd be able to sort of defend very strongly. Also, in terms of affordable housing, again, you know, take your point about, you know, it meets the policy. So is it a benefit or not? I think, you know, in the Vistry appeal decision, the inspector was quite clear on that when he said that things that are required by policy can still be a benefit. And in fact, in the affordable housing case, he gave that the sort of high, well, the inspector gave that the highest weight that you could give. So, you know, that appeal decision is quite a sort of, gives us quite a lot of information to base our assessment, and it's quite an important material consideration. So we've tried to sort of take that into account where we feel that it is relevant. Do accept that, it is a different site and there are different characteristics as well. So in terms of the, landscape impacts, they are going to be different to the the land east of the A10 versus this current site, which is on higher ground on the edge of the town into the Widial Plateau. The landscape impacts are going to be, potentially worse. So, we do accept that, but I think we have tried to take that into account in terms of the balancing exercise. Perhaps if I just sort of move on to the sort of sustainability aspect of it.
Yeah, sorry, can I just elaborate upon what you're saying about weight? And again, it's just to sort of give you a demonstration of how weight is applied. For instance, in terms of the medical centre, that serves not only the development, but it serves the town, and it serves the area, the catchment area. And so in planning terms, it serves a need beyond just the development, and it is provided for, and it's in detail. So therefore, there's more certainty that a facility will be coming forward. You've heard from the practitioners today. So there is some degree of confidence, certainty that the centre will come forward, and you've heard from the applicants that it will come forward as part of the first phase. So a facility that is serving Buntingford and the wider community has a benefit to the area. And we've had regard to, as my colleague said, about case law, and the common weighting that you would get to a facility of this nature would be a significant weight. Now, if you hear the applicant, they might take a different view as to the weight that they might want to give it more weight. But officers, we feel that we've given it the appropriate form of weighting that's consistent with other appeal decisions. So that's just an indication of how we have given the weight. So we haven't factored into the technical points about the practice and the process they have to go through to get their various approvals. That doesn't come into the planning judgment, but what comes into the planning judgment is provision of a facility that's built, that's guaranteed. And so in terms of the Vistry appeal, that's an outline scheme that doesn't guarantee it. It's just the provision for it potentially come forward. In terms of the housing, how one might apportion weight to housing, well, put simply, the bigger the number, the more weight you could give to it, for instance. So again, we've had regard to appeal decisions in this instance. It's very common to see that applications for major housing developments do get apportioned significant to substantial weight in the case of a very large development that might be plugging a hole in a council's housing supply. And so in this case, council doesn't have a 5-year supply. And so a major housing development of 200 houses is, in our view, a significant benefit. And so we've had regard to the number of the quantum of housing. The same applies to the provision of affordable housing. Clearly, 40% of the total is a large number of affordable housing. And if one is to have regard to the affordable housing that's been brought forward in East Herts over the last few years, and this was coming out of the appeal process, East Herts hasn't delivered enough affordable housing. And so at a time when we're not delivering affordable housing, provision of a 40% compliant affordable housing development is able to be afforded quite significant weight, in our view. Inspector in the Vistry appeal gave it substantial weight. Now, we think that because there's a lower quantum in this instance, that it's probably worth tempering that and giving it significant weight because of the number again. And in terms of the custom self-built housing, that's another separate element that a weight can be apportioned to. And in the Vistry appeal, that was given pretty significant weight again, I recall. But in this instance, that regard was given because there again had been an undersupply of such accommodation. So that undersupply of housing is critical to how weight is attributed. And so these are all influences in how weight is apportioned.
Okay, Steve, can I shelf the sustainability for a minute, because I've got councillor Still wanted to say something.
Sorry, we did mention sustainability before, and I want to dig a bit deeper into that. And if we could have a slide on that wall up there of the site, really. No. not really the site, is it, as such? But there was one where it showed the liable development and that sort of thing as well. And it's important to get that on the slide. That's better, you're right. Now, first of all, can you indicate where the bus stop's going to be on that drawing?
It's probably not the best plan to show it, but there's 2 bus stops proposed on the highway on Hare Street Road, on the north side and south side of the road, depending on the sort of direction. It won't go into the site.
Right, so how far are those top houses away from that bus stop? Does it meet the minimum distance?
Well, I suppose in terms of sort of distances, the Active Travel England has a sort of standing guidance, and that they issue that. And in terms of their response to this application, I think, you know, it's a sort of no objection, refer to the standing guidance. And I think it's
not happy with that. Highways have a figure that they talk about the ideal distance from a bus stop to a house. Now, what is that?
I think it's, well, in the Active Travel England guidance is 400 metres, I believe. Right. It's recommended.
So what's that distance from the bus stop to the top of that site?
I haven't scaled it.
But surely we should have that information, shouldn't we?
We do. Well, yeah, I could provide it for you.
Well, I think we need to provide it now, really.
Okay.
I think that's, I mean, it's looking like about 300 meters, I would guess, if that scale is, but, you know, it's.
I can provide an exact figure, maybe.
All right.
I mean, it's all about sustainability. If we can't sort of discuss the fact that it's going to meet the requirements, and that's one of the main things of travel. I mean, we had a site a while ago where it was just outside. That was in Bengio, and that was not too far outside. You might remember it. But I think we should have that information because that helps us understand whether the site's sustainable or
not. Can I bring us on to talking about the medical centre? Well, do you want some time?
Could I just perhaps respond to the councillor Stave's point there?
All right.
A bit more. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the exact distance, I don't know, but it's. You referred to Hart 4, and I know Hart 4 actually the bus stop wasn't even outside the site; it was some way down the street. So I think the distances in that case would be, you know, quite substantial, really, more than this. But if we just go back to that slide that I had on before, we could go to slide 38. So yeah, I mean, if we talk about in terms of sustainability, I think I see it as a sort of a couple of points here about, you know, one is about the size of Buntingford itself and its suitability for kind of large scale new housing development. We know policies in the district plan, policy Bunt 1 don't want, you know, are not seeking new housing development. It's compared to some other settlements in the district, it's small, it doesn't have a train station. However, it's still one of the sort of larger settlements in the district, particularly in this part of the district. Whilst it doesn't have some of the facilities that the larger towns like, you know, Bishop Stortford or Hertford have, or in terms of sort of employment and things, it does have a range of facilities, community facilities, schools, shops, the main sort of high street in the town, and so that is a, you know, that will mean that some journeys don't need to be taken in, you know, commuting out of the town. So, and I think so. This is probably where the Vistry appeal is quite relevant, where it considers, you know, whether Buntingford is a sustainable settlement for new housing development. And whilst it does find that there will be, you know, some increases in car trips, it's nonetheless a location where there are some services that are accessible. So, you know, as a town, it is considered to be suitable for new housing development. So I think that's really where that appeal decision does have quite a lot of similarities on that point. There's another point about sustainability, which is just, you know, the kind of the more zooming in, you know, the actual sort of details of the development, the connections, what's available in the immediate area. And you can see, you know, this plan shows what's accessible within a 400 or 800 metre walking, 10 minutes walk. And so there's a lot of facilities that are available within that time frame in terms of schools, or just outside the middle schools, just outside, or primary school next door. There's a number of shops and other amenities that are available within that distance. So, you know, compared to a number of sites, it is going to be, there are a range of facilities that can be accessed by non-car modes. And so we feel that location within the context of Buntingford as well is, you know, it is also a sustainable location.
And I could draw your attention, there's a scale. Can you see it in the bottom left? I think that gives us a rough idea of. I'm going to bring it, Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. On this point, you're saying that that green area is the 800 walk-in catchment area that you actually say makes a development sustainable, but there is only one school within that 800 metres. All the other schools, first and middle schools, are outside. So personally, I know parents will get in the car and drive. So you're looking at all those parents getting in a car and driving out to the other schools. I still can't see how that can be a sustainable development.
Was it? Yep, Councillor Holt first. I think I saw you.
Thank you. Just a very quick question. In similar sized or even smaller applications, we've often had to answer, especially these questions regarding highways and transportation, an officer from highways with us who can normally appropriately answer these questions. Can I ask why that wasn't the case this evening?
We did request that they attend, but they were unavailable due to leave and circumstances in the team.
Councillor Hill and then Councillor Estep.
Thank you, Chair. So just following on from the sustainability and the cycling aspect of that, I mean, I cycle regularly around Buntingford, and none of these maps quite get the size of the hill up to that development. It's really quite steep, and I think it put a lot of people off cycling. It's also, the road down's quite narrow and allows parking on it, and even at weekends the cars having to give way to each other. So if Councillor Buckmaster's right and people will be driving to school, that's going to cause a considerable amount of congestion on that road. And I mean, one of the feedbacks I got when I was canvassing Kilmore Council for older people was hill stopping getting into town. Or you can go down the hill to get into town, you can't get back up it. So older people walking to that's probably unlikely.
Councillor Estep.
Just two questions, if I may. But the first is, has this land been submitted in the call for sites for the local plan review?
Yes, it has.
Okay.
I understand, yeah.
Okay. Secondly, looking in terms of the likelihood of this housing being provided within the 5 years. So in a way, using the inspector's terms, in the papers, there's a document about the public consultation by Taylor Wimpey, and it gives a timeline, and it says there'd be 2 or 3 years between determination and delivery, which would then take 4 years to roll out. So that means that on the basis of their timeline, about half of these houses might be delivered within the 5 years. But I wanted to ask officers, what would you anticipate in terms of the time if this was granted permission? Then the applicant has to do a design code and get that approved. The 106 has to be completed. The reserved matters applications have to be submitted and determined, and then conditions discharged. And so what sort of time length are we talking about for those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, I mean, that's a question which came up at the public inquiry for the district development. Clearly, where it's a house builder that's national house builder that's capable of drawing on resources, it's more likely that the development can come forward quicker than a development that may not have a house builder on board. And so in this instance, developments of around sort of 300 homes, the Vistry appeal was 300 homes, 350 homes. Development today is 200 homes. And so in the Vistry appeal, it was considered that around 200, 240 homes could come forward within 5 years of the date of getting outline planning permission. And so if you were to sort of compare that to this site, then there is a potential that all 200 could come forward within 5 years of receiving planning permission. That's not to say that all 200 get included into the 5-year supply, but it means that quite a significant number are likely to come forward within the 5 years.
Next, we've got councillor Carter.
Thank you. Yes. So we asked a question, or several of us asked a question about development on agricultural land, and I didn't get an answer to that. I wanted to find out, obviously, so this is sort of expressed as negative. The loss of that grade 2 agricultural land is expressed as limited negative weight, but I don't know what that's based on, because I can see, or rather I don't see any consultation with Natural England, who would be who I think are statutory consultee for developments on agricultural land, which are in conflict with local policies, perhaps ones which are a little bit slightly bigger, but even so, I think it would be sensible to consult them, and so that we can actually have a proper assessment of the harm caused by that loss of agricultural land. Is that something that we can do?
I don't think it would be relevant in terms of consultation with Natural England. They're not a consultee with regard to loss of agricultural land. They'll mainly be involved in issues around, sort of triple SIs or nature reserves and things like that. So in terms of the weight that would be attached to agricultural land, we take a steer from other appeal decisions, and we know, it's, for instance, it was also an issue in the Vistry appeal. The inspector gave that limited weight in that case. So I think we're following the kind of taking a steer from those other appeal decisions. In terms of, I think there was also another question about, or a comment about food supply and where would the food come from. That's not really something we are assessing as part of this application. That is a matter for the government in terms of their food security strategy, and so I don't feel that it's something we need to take. We factor into account the loss of the agricultural land, but not necessarily beyond that.
Sorry, if I could just quickly come back on that. I mean, I'm looking at this government site, which is the Guide to Assessing Development Proposals on Agricultural Land, and it says, local planning authorities consult Natural England. You must consult Natural England for development proposals that are both likely to cause the loss of 20 hectares or more of best agricultural land, and in conflict with the development with the development plan. So I think they are a statutory consultee.
Can we deal with that a bit late? Can we come back on that question a bit later?
Okay, I've got councillor Dunlop. You had.
Yeah, while we're talking about sustainability, a slight deviation, is there gas planned for the site?
Sorry, could you just repeat that question?
In terms of sustainability, is gas planned for the site for heating purposes, either for the medical centre or for houses?
So in terms of the heating strategy, the sustainability strategy for housing, what will be the case when these houses are built is that the new Future Homes Building Regulation standard would be would apply. And whilst we don't know what they will show, exactly what they will require, it's pretty certain that they won't have gas boilers in them in order to be sort of zero carbon ready. I think also the applicants have been sort of looking into sort of future compliance with the new building regulations, and they've been sort of doing trial projects on their other sites, looking at the sort of range of technologies. And you know, in this development would be certainly the housing would be, you know, all electric. There wouldn't be gas in it.
Okay.
Sorry, can I keep going on the sustainability
Yeah,
one?
I'll let you come back on it.
In terms of location, surely it's in the wrong place. It should be in the other side, closer to the A10, where most of the commuting will actually take place, and where it appears there is some land there. So, you know, you're not sustaining the views, the sort of location. The food is a negative in terms of sustainability. So, in my view, on many fronts, it seems to fail on sustainability, and it just looks like it's where someone has decided they wanted it to go.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. This is a continuation really from Councillor Estrop's comments. If this application was to be granted, would the reserved matters come back to the DNC, or would they be determined by officers?
They would normally be reserved matters. I mean, delegated to officers, but the normal sort of rules would apply in terms of you know, members could require it to come to the planning committee if they wanted.
Okay, members, can I bring us on to the medical centre specifically and the acceptability of the proposed medical centre in the location? Councillor Connolly.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit concerned about the implications of the Integrated Care Board's lack of commitment or not wanting to engage with this.
Just if you speak closer to your microphone.
Sorry. I'm concerned about the ICB's lack of engagement with this building, and so I feel that the weighting of the medical centre isn't quite right, because we keep saying it's a provision of a medical centre. To me, it seems it's the provision of a building that could be used for a medical centre, and I think that would reduce my weighting somewhat.
Councillor Copley and then
the medical centre itself, I think there was talk earlier on about who owned it and its use. Is it definitely going to be a medical centre, and will it be, you know, stay as a medical centre for all time, i.e. it couldn't have another use at some point? And could we just clarify the ownership of it? Because my concern is we all, you know, approve a medical centre and then either we do get a medical centre for a short period of time or we don't get one at all.
Councillor Devonshire, did you have a similar point, or? Oh, well, I'll let you.
It was just one of the speakers, I can't remember which one, said that there was a meeting that was held. I don't know who was at that meeting, but he said, I think, that none of the attendees wanted the medical centre. I don't know who was at that meeting, but it seems a bit concerning that none of the attendees at that meeting wanted this medical centre in that location. They said it was a out of town, can't get to it, non-sustainable.
Okay, I'll let the officers come back on the the ownership question, etc.
Yeah. So in terms of, I mean, I don't know exactly who's going to own the site in the long term, and that's not really a planning consideration. But I take the point that there's an unknown in terms of there's no guarantee that it will be sort of opened, you know, and the ICB will come on board and do whatever they need to do to require it to operate. But that is inherent with any sort of community kind of infrastructure development, and so I think we have sort of adjusted the weighting in the planning balance to take into account the fact that the ICB aren't sort of fully supporting the application. So you know, we've lowered it from the highest to a substantial. So, but what I think what we do know is that the applicants are committed to building the building and fitting it out. So, you know, that's as much as they can be required to do, because it's not within their power to actually physically operate and run the building. So there are going to be some unknowns there, but we do know it's going to be built and fitted out, and we can require that. So, you know, that is you know, for developments like this where the community infrastructure is proposed, that's normally the best we can do, really. You know, because beyond that, it requires other organisations to sort of come on board.
I know you've Councillor Estop and Buckmaster, but can I just bring in Councillor Marlowe, because I think you've got something relevant to.
So I'm very anxious about this business about the ICB not being in tune with this plan, and I'm wondering, because then we get very fudgy about all of this, and it could end up that we don't have a medical centre, but we do have a housing estate, and I'm very concerned about that. So this is a theoretical question: can we condition the whole scheme that until the ICB comes on board or doesn't, no planning permission is granted?
That condition wouldn't really meet the test of attaching a planning condition, because it's requiring something from the developer that they're not able to, it's not in their gift to do, because it involves a sort of third party. But as we're proposing in terms of the conditions that are attached, the way condition 7 reads, it means that the housing can't come forward, or beyond the sort of first phase of housing, if the medical centre isn't built and fitted out. So I think, you know, that gives us a good certainty that as much as we can do in the planning system, that you know, we can do what we can do to facilitate its delivery.
Right, Councillor Estop.
Yes, also concerned about the same matter. We've had a very clear message from what we've read in the report and what we've heard today, that it seems very clear that the ICB is not on board, but it's very clear that there are other options. The option appraisal has not completed. There's a sense that this is premature. The medical centre part is premature, so that's one concern. A second concern I've got is that Taylor Wimpey build houses at Stortford Fields in Bishop Stortford. Within their development, there was a medical centre planned. They sold that land to Frontier Estates, who have not built a medical centre. So how assured can we be that this would be delivered? Because that, I imagine, something similar would happen to that. And then thirdly, we heard you say today that condition number 7 is going to be adjusted to allow houses to start being built. So that takes away the whole point of this whole application. There's a medical centre with 200 houses on the back, and yet houses can start being rolled out, you know, without that medical centre being firmly established. So 3 concerns.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Sorry, Chair, I was actually going to ask about the ownership of the doctors, and it's been asked.
All right, Councillor Copley.
I think we're all expressing, you know, the same concerns about the medical centre, and that we're not at a point where we understand whether it even go forward with the ICB. Are we able to defer this application pending further discussions on that, and then come back to the committee once we have more detail on that? I've got a question for the officers just in terms of what we can do. Thank you.
Could I just,
Oh, yep. Is it quick point?
Yes, if we could add to the deferral the consultation on the agricultural land as well.
So on the sort of medical centre and the deferral point, so just in terms of, you know, some of the comments about the application being premature, from the sort of discussions and conversations, for instance, at the Development Management Forum, we know that the consideration of other sites has been taking place for a long time. We've heard from the medical practice that they were looking at for sites at, you know, at the time of the Sainsbury's depot redevelopment in around sort of 2014. So I think from our understanding, it has been going on a long time. There are a number of other sites that have been looked at and found to be not suitable for whatever reason. But we feel that this isn't a significant point that the committee should get sort of bogged down in, because what we've been asked to consider is this site a suitable location for a medical centre? Not considering whether there's another site that might be a little bit better. That it's the proposal that is in front of us. There may be more than one site in Buntingford that is suitable for a medical centre. So we have to just consider the application as it is before us, really, on that point, on the alternatives. And then in terms of the sort of deferral, we wouldn't see the ICB comments as being grounds for deferring the application. I think in terms of how the development is driven, we understand the practice are the people that would be sort of doing the most to sort of deliver a project like this, and they put the application in. It's been submitted to us. We need to consider it and consider the suitability of the site for a medical practice, really.
Councillor Holt.
Thank you. My main point has already been covered regarding a deferral, but just a point of clarification. From my understanding is that the ICB would be key to the fitting out of the medical centre with medical equipment, and also for it to be actual functioning surgery. When it's being referred to being fitted out, to what level is that? Is that just fitted out as a functioning building, or would that be fitted out as a functioning medical centre? That is what's being provided by the developer. Thank you.
Well, our understanding is that the fitting out is the facilities within the building, and that would be in consultation with the medical practice, and we assume that they would need to speak to the ICB about that. But I don't know for sure. But we do know that the building will be fitted out to meet the doctor's requirements.
Councillor Still.
It's just that we had some while ago. I think it's in Bishop Stork.
Councillor Still, could you just a bit closer to your microphone?
Certainly. It was a housing site, but there was a plot of land there that had been allocated for a school. And they didn't want to build a school. They wanted to improve a school up the road. So the developer had to buy the land back from county, but they required a planning application to actually build houses on that. So really what people are worried about, if they didn't build a medical centre, or they built it and whatever, it need planning to change it into housing. And we could call it in to committee.
Right, members, just move things on a little bit. We've discussed the. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Apologies, I just add some more clarity on the policies that you have to take into account in terms of the medical centre, and trying to give you some more help in sort of coming to that. So what's on the table is a medical practice in this location. The test that my colleague has referred to is about, is this a suitable site for a medical centre? There are no policy tests that require you to consider alternative locations, and so that exercise that the medical practice have started in 2014, which you've heard from the practice today, that's been ongoing for 10 years, and so that culminated in selecting the application site last year at some stage, and so that's a sort of separate process that happens outside of what the planning requires. So what we're asking you to consider today is medical practice on this site in a appropriate location. I think that's a very sort of key point in terms of the fit out. It's a fit out to for the facilities, but not the actual equipment. That equipment gets fitted in accordance with the ICBs and all the relative guidance that's produced there. That's nothing that we can guarantee. And in terms of the question of guaranteeing whether the medical centre will be delivered first, the applicant has made it that intention, hence why they've submitted an application in a hybrid form. And so before they come to design the houses, produce a design code for the houses, they've already got a detailed plan for a medical centre, and they know what is required for that medical centre. They've been liaising with the surgery themselves, so they know exactly what type of facility is required. The housing is following on from behind. So the very first stage of this process is for it to be an infrastructure-led development. So the very first thing that gets built is the medical centre at the time. There are housing that are coming forward around that same time, but that is separate subject to a separate reserve matters process. The very fact that there's a full application should give members a lot more certainty, confidence that something is coming forward in advance of matters that are reserved, such as the housing element. And so in terms of the phasing, we also have an ability to approve a phasing plan, and that phasing plan will detail when things come forward, the stage they come forward, and the sequence they come forward. And of course, if they were to deviate from that phasing plan, they would be not in accordance with the planning permission. And so this application is predicated on the basis of infrastructure first, housing second, and as part of the first phase of development, the surgery is coming forward.
Councillor Estop.
Just to clarify then what officers have told us, which is that if we decided that this was a suitable location for a medical centre and it got planning permission, that doesn't stop other options being looked at. Other options that process can continue. Ultimately, the ICB there might be a business plan, there might be a sensible financial arrangement for somewhere else, and that's not stopped by this having permission.
Would members like to discuss the suitability of the medical centre in that location? Shall we move on to transportation, or do you think we've covered that in our broader discussion? I think we might have. Can we go on to yes.
Just in terms of the sort of accessibility for the medical centre, talked before about the sort of walking distances and so on, and appreciate the comments about, there's a lot of comments about the hill and so on. So there are a number of other measures within the application to assist access if people aren't able to walk. So for instance, there's a financial contribution towards the BCAT scheme. The proposal does include bus stops outside the site, and there are financial contributions towards the bus improvements as well. And also, we're aware that the medical practice serves quite a sort of wide catchment area. So there are patients who live in Buntingford, but it also serves patients outside of Buntingford in the rural area, the wider rural area. So so patients travelling in from further afield, if they are driving, there is car parking provision on site. There's also the bus enhancements as well. In terms of the Natural England comments, we believe the site doesn't meet the consultation requirements for Natural England. The criteria set out in the development management procedure order.
Okay. Can we go on to drainage and?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry.
Oh.
I was just going to expand on that to say that's because the site size is less than the threshold. So just to provide that clarity, so there would be no need for us to consult with them. So I think that's quite clear from the material in the committee report, which confirms the site size is 13.34 hectares, and that's the same in the application material as well.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think we haven't got much evidence on why it's given a negative, why the loss of this agricultural land is considered to have not very significant, negative weighting. So it would be, my point was, it would be a good idea to consult them, because then we would have some evidence as to what effect it would have. So that was my point.
Can we move on to? Does anyone else want?
It's just that they're not a statutory consultee, and so if they objected, they would be speaking outside of their remit, and so in some ways they can't object. So it wouldn't add any into the process. In terms of how we've applied the limited adverse effect. We apply it consistently for applications of similar scales where you have agricultural land of that quality. So the way that it's rated here is not different to other applications. So I think that's the best way we can reassure you that we're being consistent with decisions. The Vistry appeal was given a limited weight, and that application is for a larger site, for instance. And so just to give you an indication that for a bigger site, weight was attributed for a limited weight, and so in our view it would be applied on the same basis.
Can we move on to drainage? If anyone wants to, got some comments on drainage? I think it's the site has had in the past, there were concerns from the what's it called? There's a condition to deal with the concerns of the consultee on the site drainage. Could you just talk through that a bit? I was struggling to understand all this sort of 5 litres per second. And
Yeah, so in terms of drainage, the LLFA, the statutory consultee with regard to surface water drainage, so not foul sewage drainage. That's a separate matter. So just in terms of surface water drainage, the LLFA initially raised an objection to the application. They just wanted some more information about the capacity of the drainage system, that the surface water drainage system in the adjacent development that's been the built out development, and also further details about the easement for any drainage pipes into the drainage ditch to the east. So the applicants, drainage consultants, have been liaising with LLFA, submitted additional information which has addressed their concerns such that they don't they no longer object to the application. They did raise, there are some differences of opinion between the applicants, consultants and the LLFA about some of the sort of figures that have arrived at and what should be taken into account and not, depending particularly in terms of sort of, you know, what allowance should be made for what currently happens at the site, in that it's a field, it drains into the adjacent site, and where does that go, and how does it end up in the drainage system of the housing development next door. So there's not a sort of full agreement on that between the LLFA and the applicants, consultants, but that doesn't matter because the LLFA have satisfied that they they can withdraw their objection, and that those, you know, further details can be resolved at the through the planning conditions.
Councillor Erstop.
I have to keep reminding myself there's a difference between surface water drainage, runoff, and wastewater drainage. So I understand the situation with the surface water. On wastewater, I wonder if officers could provide a response to the very well articulated objections from the town council about wastewater, the pumping up and down the hill and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, in terms of foul water drainage, the Thames Water are responsible for foul water drainage in the area, and the way the sort of legislation works in terms of sort of separate legislation outside of planning is that if new housing development comes forward, they have the ability to connect to the public sewage networks, but the sewage network, or the water company, Thames Water in this case, is responsible for identifying if there are further upgrades required in terms of capacity or treatment of the additional demand, and then can negotiate with the applicants or developers for that to be provided. The applicants have undertaken a consultation, pre-application consultation with Thames Water, have indicated that it's one of the appendices to the drainage strategy, that there is sufficient foul water capacity to meet the needs of the development. We've also proposed a condition. This is Thames Water haven't actually, I don't think they've requested that condition, but we've required it. We put it on anyway, noting the kind of the public concern. requiring that confirmation, that's condition 35, no development shall be occupied until confirmation provided that foul water capacity exists off-site, development or development and infrastructure phasing plan to be agreed with local planning authority and Thames Water in consultation with Thames Water. That's a sort of standard kind of condition that they sometimes recommend. Yeah, and further, it says no occupation shall take place other than in accordance with the agreed development and infrastructure phasing plan. So there is a condition we're proposing to require that further conversations can take place with the planning authority, Thames Water and the applicants if the Thames Water position does change and they do feel that infrastructure is required, then there's a mechanism in place to ensure that those conversations take place and that the applicants will then have to provide it or negotiate with Thames Water to provide it.
Councillor Copley, thank you.
Hi, thanks. Can I just revisit the surface water drainage? So do we currently have like a clear plan which actually shows where the current drainage is and then how it will be when the new houses are built? I'm just, again, talking from experience on the north of Stortford with Taylor Wimpey, and there were some very inaccurate drainage plans which caused quite a lot of issues and discussions. So I just wanted to double check that we actually had the correct thing in place.
So this is the drainage strategy plan. So we don't have detailed drawings of the sort of drainage strategy within those areas because it's an outline application. So those would be reserved matters. But in terms of the sort of the overall strategy, we've assessed and the LLFA have assessed. So that just shows the two sort of catchment areas. So it drains to the east, drains to the west, and there's two different, and then there's two different outfalls from those different directions. So, and in terms of the LLFA will be assessing in terms of the size of those areas, the runoff rates that are likely, the size of the attenuation basins that will be required in order to kind of accommodate water, and then feed those in slowly into the water courses.
Thank you.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Yes. So the drainage has to be in place before the houses can be occupied, but I sort of feel as though we ought to be more satisfied with the drainage arrangements before the houses are built rather than before they're occupied. It seems a bit late in the day to, if Thames Water changes their mind about needing a lot more capacity, it's difficult to stop houses being occupied once they've been built. So I wonder if we could make that earlier, rather than having it a pre-occupation condition, to make it a construction condition.
Just to come back on that quickly, the condition number 35 has a sort of third strand to it, which is all foul water. This is just the foul water details. All the upgrades will be required to accommodate the additional flows from the development will be completed. So no development shall be occupied until that's been carried out. And so we have to, in order to discharge that condition, which is a process that we have to go through before occupation, there is a control. And so if housing is occupied prior to that condition being discharged, then they're in breach of planning permission. And that's obviously, subject to potential enforcement if that's the case. So there are controls in that condition that do what I think you're wanting it to do.
I appreciate that, but I just think it should be earlier in the process. So not pre-occupation, but pre-construction, so that we know that there is going to be sufficient drainage capacity for those houses. That's the point that I was trying to make there, and also from that point of view for the supply of water, so that we know that there's enough water for those for that development before it's built, rather than finding that out after the houses have been built.
I mean, condition 28 talks about the site-wide strategy, and that is a no phase of development hereby approved shall be occupied until details of management and maintenance. And that talks about things like the timetable for implementation when the SUDS features come on board. And so all of that has to be approved before anything gets occupied. And so in terms of the trigger point, we feel that's probably in the right location, and it's consistent with other conditions that we've secured in other applications. There's surface water drainage condition 21, which discusses surface water drainage from the highway. Again, that's dealing with surface water, and that's a prior to commencement of any phase of development. So some of the information that you're seeking is prior to occupation. There's also a condition 16 talks about interim drainage measures, and so that's again tying commencement to phasing being established. There's a SUDS phasing plan. All of that is prior to submission of reserve matters. So there is a whole sequence of conditions that go through the detail earlier on in the planning process before occupation. So it's all designed sequentially to relate to when development is coming forward. Obviously, the detailed design of the development at the moment allows more information to come forward and drainage for the detailed element, but the outline element at the moment, less is known, and so that's why there's these sequential series of conditions.
Councillor Stowe.
Yes, thank you. Because we're not really considering the drainage on the housing site tonight, I wanted to know what the drainage arrangements are for the medical centre. Is that discharging straight into the sewer on Hare Street for the foul drainage? Obviously, the attenuation pond is there. That's that's the rainwater. That's fine. But where's the sewage going?
Maybe not. Do we have a red line here? 27.
So, okay, yeah. So in terms of the sort of parameter, in terms of the parameter plan, the drainage. So we're talking about surface water drainage. For the medical centre.
I think it was foul water drainage. Was it surface?
I said the surface water drainage obviously goes to the attenuation pond, which is in the site of the detailed planning. I'm not at the foul water.
Foul water, sorry, yeah. So if you go back to 44. So the foul water strategy is that so the red, you might be able to see the sort of red line at the bottom along Hare Street Road. So the proposal would be for a foul water sewer. So all the whole development would drain down to that lowest point, which is that sort of pumping station indicated on the sort of right hand side of the site there. At which, yeah, that's it. Yeah. At which point it would then, this is for the residential, it would then be pumped up over the hill and then with gravity down to join to the existing sewer on Hare Street Road. The medical centre will feed into that. I think you can see just a sort of another arrow that sort of comes out of the development under the road and then goes loops round out by the main site access to connect to that sewer that will then be going down towards the Hare Street Road.
Okay, so have we dealt with wastewater to our satisfaction? I'm going to open it up if there are any other points. Councillor Dunlop.
I just wondered, have other sites been considered for these houses? For example, brownfield land. I don't think I saw any reference in the report to consideration of brownfield or previously developed land.
I mean, that sort of consideration would happen as part of the development plan. So, you know, the East Herts district plan would allocates sites and looks to allocate sites on brownfield land and or in some cases urban extension sites next to towns. But that policy, those sort of policies which were looking to sort of, you know, take that approach and kind of steer the development to those, you know, to sort of, for instance, brownfield sites. You know, unfortunately, we can't give as much weight to those anymore because of the tilted balance. So in terms of the MPPF, it considers that the plan is out of date with regard to, because there's not enough brownfield sites in the plan to deliver, or they're not delivering enough for our 5-year housing land supply. So the NPPF requires that we then have to consider other sites.
And that, just another point, we have to determine what's in front of us.
Yeah, no, the reason I ask is because we're sacrificing agricultural land.
Yeah, but we're
and
determining
government
what's...
policy, which is what I thought was the answer to the agricultural land.
Councillor Dunlop, we're not creating a new master plan here. We're just determining what is in front of us.
Can I ask a different question? Has government...
I'm going to bring in...
Okay.
I'll circle back to you. I'll bring in Councillor Copley.
Thank you. I'm just trying to check I've understood this correctly here, because what it's coming across to me, and maybe I'm misunderstood, is that we're being told because of the tilted balance, we have to ignore, you know, the district plan and any other plans that are in place, and then again we're having to look at a site which isn't an infill, it's just a site standalone in a rural area, and therefore, and then we're looking at the fact, because houses are being built, and I'd say every application we look at, houses are being built, because there's the tilted balance, we have to give that significant weight. I'm just finding that a bit confusing, because it just seems like every application we look at now, maybe this is the situation, we have to ignore all the plans that are in place and just look at the fact that some houses are being built. Is that correct? Sorry, I don't mean to be facetious or anything, I'm just trying to check I've understood.
Can I ask Councillor Dunlop's question first as well, and I'll come back to Councillor Copley. The key thing for Councillor Dunlop to be advised of is that there's no requirement for a sequential type of assessment that I think you're referring to in terms of selecting this site for housing. So that isn't a policy test that this development has to meet. And so the first thing to say is that we can't determine this application on the basis that housing is more acceptable on another site. You are being encouraged to make a decision on this site, and I think that's the sort of, you know, the first response. In terms of Councillor Copley, the weight given to the district plan is reduced. That doesn't mean it's given no weight at all, and so the way that we've set out this report is to identify the amount of weight that officers consider should be given to the district plan policies, and why we consider that's been given that weighting. So with the appeal that was fought recently on the land to the east of the A10, we fought for significant weight being attached, which is pretty high weight to the local plan. It's over 5 years old, and so it cannot be applied full weight in any regard, but it can be applied quite significant weight, which is what we argued at the appeal. The inspector disagreed with us and decided that our policies relating to supply, because they're relevant, are out of date and can only be applied in this instance moderate weight for a site which is of comparable scale and type, such as this proposal before you today. We've afforded it moderate weight, which is not to say it isn't. We're not disregarding the local plan. We're not putting it aside. We're just applying less weight in the balance overall. And of course, as the decision maker, you are being asked to put a value to the weight that you consider as councillor. So
sorry, that is really helpful, because I was feeling like when we were taking old policies, that means it's extinguished, but no, it's just less weight.
I'll let Councillor Dunlop come back.
Thank you. I didn't bother switching my microphone off. I thought you would be coming back to me. I'm just referring to a statement that was given by the Secretary of State on the 23rd of May, I think, or 15th of May this year. And it says it's the new national policy statement that we published in January makes clear that applicants should, where possible, utilise suitable previously developed land, brownfield land, contaminated land and industrial land. For proposed use of any agricultural land has been shown to be necessary, poor quality land should be preferred to higher quality land, avoiding the use of best and most versatile agricultural land where possible. this is best and most versatile agricultural land, and therefore this national policy statement is advising us that we should try to avoid it.
That's in connection with formulation of policies, and so that isn't necessarily the decisions for planning applications. So that is relevant, and it's certainly the direction that the new government want to go as well. And so promotion of brownfield first and sustainable locations, that's the direction that the current government considers is the right way to go. But it's all about formulating policies, and the policies are set in the district plan. Our district plan is now expired. It's out of date in terms of it. Some of the policies are older and over 5 years, and so they're applied the way that I've just explained. But that guidance that you just outlined is about formation of policy, and so for decision making, there isn't a policy test that means you have to go to brownfield before you consider this site.
Councillor Estop.
My take on this is that this greenfield site is not allocated in the district plan, and that's because of the strategy for Buntingford, which is that is not capable of growth, and those factors are not out of date. Meanwhile, and notwithstanding the inspector's decision, allocated sites that are brownfield sites are in progress, and this is from the officer's briefing on that inspector's report. Bishop Stortford North, Bishop Stortford High School, the goods yard, those three are all with permission, allocated permission, actively being progressed, and they take precedence in my view.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. For me, it all goes back to, is this a sustainable location? And I don't believe it is. And I'll tell you why. Car usage. Somewhere in this report, and I can't find it at the moment, it says that a lot of the patients to the medical centre are within the rural area outside Buntingford, got to drive there. In fact, one of the officers alluded to the parking. Also, we all know Buntingford does not have a train station, which once again, for me, promotes car usage. You've got to use a car to live on this site. So for me, it's not a sustainable location. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're at the stage now of discussing and putting our cards on the table, but Councillor Estop.
We had a discussion about one of the conditions just now. I wonder if officers could just explain a bit more what you said in the introduction about condition number 7, because I've lost it now, but condition 7 is about making sure the medical centre is built before housing. There's the first bit is details of the fit out should be done first, and then actually build it before occupation. I would like that to stay as it is, and the first part, the approval of the details of the fit out and so on, to change that to before commencement of building houses. So it genuinely is infrastructure first, in the light of some doubt about it. So, but could officers clarify what was being proposed for condition 7?
So yeah, I mean the intention is sort of early delivery of the medical centre. I think in terms of the sort of the fit out, we're specifying that because as planning officers, we're not sort of experts on how the medical centre should be fitted out, but we want to make sure that there's not sort of any sort of arguments at a later date about is it sort of built for fit for purpose and so on. So that's why we're requiring the sort of details of the fit out to be submitted and agreed. In terms of the sort of the phasing of that, I mean, take your point about the not changing the condition wording as suggested in the updates report. I think some things to bear in mind on that point are in terms of placemaking. I don't think the intention, even before with the wording as it originally was ever to stop houses or construction starting on the houses, because that wouldn't be desirable from a number of points of view. One is in terms of placemaking, that you wouldn't want the medical centre to be built, the road there, and then sort of nothing else happen. It would be better if the sort of place started to take shape sort of all together, and you've got sort of the arrival experience coming into the medical centre through the sort of first phase of development. I suppose the question, there was a question of the sort of easiest trigger point is you can't occupy the houses until medical centres built. The applicants are seeking some flexibility on that. Members, can take a view on that, whether that change is something they would want to agree or not. The other thing to consider is also that the housing delivery is, an important benefit of the development. The council, as we've talked about, doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. There's a strong kind of impetus from the MPPF to promote sort of early delivery of housing. And so if the condition is worded restrictively, then that could prevent housing coming forward early, which is something, that is considered to be a positive in terms of the sort of MPPF.
Right, members, can we maybe have a discussion, have a look at the planning balance? Councillor Stowe.
I'm sorry, but I have a question on the medical centre. I think it's page 39, I think it was, but that doesn't matter. It's about car parking, 60 spaces, only just meets the requirements. What ideally should you wanted then for car parking in the medical centre? And that was one thing. And the second thing, I might have missed it, but electric charging points in the medical centre. Answer that for me.
In terms of the numbers, it meets the policy requirements. I suppose, there is a interpretation of the policy based on the site circumstances. That's something we normally have to do on different sites. So, maybe a more accessible site with better public transport links or whatever, you might sort of accept a lower level of parking below the standards. Whereas, maybe there's an argument for more if it's less accessible, but also you've got to sort of bear in mind that if you do provide a lot of car parking, then that can encourage car use and discourage travel by active travel modes. So it's not always a case of more is better. There's a sort of sweet spot, I suppose. I mean, as far as in terms of the officer assessment, it meets the standards. So, there's not really a reason for refusal on that ground. We've got evidence from the ICB that they don't want any more car parking in, the beyond what's already proposed, certainly. So, our view is that as is proposed is acceptable.
The only reason I brought it out was the fact that you did put in just meets, and that almost tells me that it's right on the line. And bearing in mind that you've said yourselves that some of the people going to the medical centre will be coming from the rural areas outside Buntingford. It's not just about Buntingford. Surely you need the maximum car parking spaces you can get.
I mean, I would have thought that it would be difficult to make them stipulate them building the maximum. I mean, if don't the standards say you have to build this amount, and therefore if they're going to build that amount?
But I'm not saying that, am I? I'm just saying that the officer put in the report, it just that implies to me that it's right on the line, and it might if it meets the SPD, you say it meets the SPD. You wouldn't say it just meets it.
Yeah, I think it was in discussion about the care commissioning people thinking there were too many. So maybe anyway, Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Yes, just one other point about which was raised by the Sawbridge with Swifts Association, which was around condition 40, which says that prior to first occupation, details of back boxes, Swift boxes, etc., should be submitted. And their point was that Swift bricks and B bricks are integral to the building, not to be added afterwards. So so the details need to be earlier. It needs to be a precondition. So is that possible?
I think we thought it was quite onerous to require that prior to commencement, because the guidance of government is that you should only use those conditions where it's sort of absolutely necessary. I think perhaps one thing that did occur to me is a more a sort of in between ground would be a wording something like no above ground works until should take place until the details are being submitted and agreed, which then brings it forward a little bit, but still allows the applicants to sort of do lots of like site preparation and initial work on the site.
So do we have to propose that change, or will it just go in?
I think it would need a motion to add that in.
It would require a motion to change that.
It would require a motion.
Well, in that case, can I propose that that it, instead of being prior to first occupation, it's prior to above ground works on condition 40.
And councillor Connolly?
I'd like to second that, please.
Okay. Yes, you're proposing the condition change. We've got a proposal and it's been seconded.
So this just refers specifically to this condition?
Just referring to this condition. We're not voting for anything else. Right. Can I see hands to approve that? Okay, and any, is that everyone? Yeah. That's everyone. Okay. Now, we need to be weighing up now the pros and cons of this. And if we have any, if we're minded to go against the officer recommendation, we need to be quite clear about where we're leaning, what policy, etc. Councillor Estop.
Well, it's really very difficult because I can see that although this hasn't been through the policy process, there's been a lot of work with officers and the applicants, and they put together a coherent scheme, most of which in itself seems quite sound. But I can't quite get over the fact that it is in conflict with policy. And my inclination is to stand up for the district plan, effectively.
What specific policy?
The policy for housing doesn't allocate this land. So we don't have a policy that allocates. So it's an absence.
Which policy?
So it's the absence of a policy for this land, and secondly, it's the strategy for Buntingford, which is I've lost it again. But the chapter on Buntingford has this.
Sorry, can I just? I think it's called BUNT 1, BUNT 1, and GBR 2. They're against those two policies.
And so I don't feel content that the appeal decision for east of the A10 just kind of rides roughshod over all that. That the land, the land supply trumps everything. The sites that are in progress need to be delivered, and so the developers for those sites in Bishop Stortford that have got allocations and got permissions need to just get on with them and they know that, but they're brownfield sites and it's not always easy, but they need to just be, we need to support them.
Yeah,
And
just to be quite clear, I mean. Oh yeah, can I bring in the solicitor?
I'd just like to remind members that members are not bound to accept the recommendation of the officers. However, if officers' professional and technical advice is not followed, members need to show reasonable planning grounds, citing the relevant authority for the grounds put forward for taking a contrary decision. So you need to be absolutely clear what policies you are citing in any grounds for refusals. And obviously, if it is refused and it is appealed, members might be called upon to give evidence at the appeal to support the decision that they've taken.
So, you know, I'm not not trying to make things hard for you, but we really do need to have something that can stand up to an appeal if we were.
Well, I think those the policies in the Buntingford chapter that we've heard. The other part of this is that the district plan, there's a planned review of the district plan. It's being reviewed in a timely manner. The gradual erosion of land at Buntingford by appeal means that we're denying that review the opportunity for a proper strategy, because if there is to be growth in Buntingford in the future, it needs to be master planned in a comprehensive manner. This site probably wouldn't be part of that master plan. But so in terms of so there's a concern, and it's work that the council's actively doing, but the policies are, as Councillor Devonshire said.
Can I bring in Sarah Saunders?
Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned about some of the emphasis that you're putting on things. I do think I have to remind you that, we do have a district plan. It is out of date. It's very normal for sites to come forward that aren't allocated to deal with as a windfall, as speculative. Yes, it's up to you to consider the weight, but you can't put things on hold because of a district plan review. You do have to determine what's in front of you. And I would take you to the housing supply policy, which is a minimum. And I don't think you can really disregard that appeal decision. And I think that would lead to issues if there was to be any appeal in this situation. That's my advice. I just want to remind you that it is not unusual for speculative applications to come forward and to be in this situation. There's nothing to say that those allocated sites have to be built out before other applications can be considered.
So, Councillor Devonshire.
Yeah, this is just clarification, really. Is it a consideration that we don't believe this is a sustainable location?
You can take that into account. Yeah. It depends on what weight you want to give that and how you balance that with other factors. You've obviously got our considerations that have been set out, and you will need to weigh that up.
I'd like to come in on the Councillor Devonshire's question about sustainability of location, and I can take him back to the appeal process as well, if I may. When Vistry appealed the application, we sought to challenge that on the basis of it being an unsustainable location. So all of the issues that have been aired tonight, the strategy that led to Buntingford being afforded that strategy back in 2014, 15, and then it was adopted in 2018. All the issues that have sort of been aired tonight were aired at the appeal. Now, as part of that appeal, we sought to obtain technical evidence to back up our view at that time that Buntingford was not a sustainable location to accept growth of any kind, let alone of the sort of scale that was presented at that time. The appellant produced technical evidence in the form of a transport consultant who came and explained all the various accessibility around Buntingford, the distance to services, the amount of walking time it takes to get from place to place, and proximity to everything else. And the council would have relied heavily on our highways officers to establish whether Buntingford was sustainable in that respect. And as part of the planning application process, the Highways Authority raised an objection to that application. They don't raise objection to this planning application. They are satisfied that Buntingford has got sufficient satisfactory walking cycling resources. So when it comes to an appeal, when we're not able to put forward technical evidence to counter that, we stand less chance of success at defending it. And so we really did try to defend that on those exact points as part of the appeal earlier on this year. And so in absence of a technical consultee objecting, Active Travel England have also looked into this sort of sustainability of the location, and they've raised no objections to this application. They were concerned about the appeal scheme, but they were satisfied in terms of the steps that were taken there, as similar steps have been taken in this application. So in order to try and provide you with some assurance about Buntingford and overall level of sustainability that it has, it's been through a very technical process as part of an appeal. An inspector has, as recently as August, has determined that Buntingford is one of the 5 main towns capable of taking development, and including housing development, and is able to apportion significant benefit to provision of housing at this time. And so we come to that question about, well, if we're not supported with technical evidence as to why Buntingford isn't sustainable, then we have less grounds to go on in terms of fighting that appeal. It's not to say that we don't, have concerns about it, because as you see from the report, we do consider that there is, moderate harm from increased car trips within this development and the effect that the over-reliance on cars has. And so we share that concern, and we've identified it as a conflict with the district plan. We've identified it as a conflict with the neighbourhood plan. It doesn't necessarily fall foul of the NPPF test of severe harm. And so from a highways perspective, we can't challenge this in terms of the impact on the wider area and from sustainability terms. And so all that is to sort of sum up is that if we were to be having the same debate at a public inquiry or an appeal, the similar arguments would be wielded out by this appellant, as was just wielded out from the previous appellant, and an inspector making a decision in August, a year later, when the housing needs in East Herts are likely to be much higher next year. Our strong suspicion as officers is that we will have limited grounds to defend that reason if that was the direction that members were going on. So I urge you to sort of think about that very carefully, because it was a matter that we fought long and hard as part of the appeal. We weren't supported with technical evidence at the time.
All right, members, it's what, 13 minutes to 10. So I propose that we extend the meeting indefinitely. I think we're coming until we finish the agenda. The reason being that I don't want us rushed and stuff. And I think we are in the final discussion, but I don't want us rushed. Can somebody second it, please? Yeah. Councillor Buckmaster. And can we have a vote on that, please? Carry on. Okay. Right. So and I think I would really strongly encourage everyone to speak now. If you're really, it would be good to know what you're thinking. What policies you think we've overlooked, what weightings might change. Councillor Dunlop.
I presume sustainability is not a black and white thing. You get levels of sustainability. So it's not about this is sustainable or this isn't sustainable. So we can take a judgment on that ourselves as to what level of sustainability on our own scales we allow. Also, I think we've sort of forgotten about the landscape. Like, that was given considerable weight in the officer's report, and it really does destroy the landscape for the short to medium term.
You're quite right, Councillor Dunlop. I don't think we really sufficiently discussed landscape. So if anyone's got something to say, more say on landscape, it's a good point.
Well, I'll go.
Councillor Marlowe.
I mean, it's more an emotional thing. I mean, I've driven that road into Buntingford on a regular basis, and it is spectacular in a way, because you come over through those fields and down, and it opens up in front of you. This way, we're just going to hit a housing estate. That's what it is, isn't it? I don't suppose there's a policy around that, but I feel aggrieved that we're going to lose that because it is lovely. And coming up the hill that all these people can't get up to the medical centre, again, you come out and you've got this spectacular open vista leading to the house that's Ainsley Hall. You know, it is a lovely landscape, and I will be sorry to lose that. But I don't know. I think we're caught in a very bad place here between a need for housing and a need for retaining something that is lovely. And I know which side it's weighted on. It's not because we're here. It's not weighted on our emotional side, is it? Really, and we're stuck with it. And so we're now facing that thing of, do we go against it, full in the knowledge that we're likely to end up not in a good place? You know, that's what I feel. But I don't think we've got any policy that was going to, from what I'm hearing here from the professionals talking to us, I don't think we have much to stand on.
Neil Button.
Thank you. Now, just to give you some further help in how you might want to think about this before you form your judgment, and it relates to landscape. So the proposals will amount to permanent change to the rural landscape, and that will change the character of the eastern edge of Buntingford. So members need to come to a view on that conflict, because it is a conflict with DES 2 in the district plan. It also comes into conflict with the neighbourhood plan policies that we've discussed earlier on. All those policies, they seek to place a higher value on the landscape character and the degree to which those policies are consistent with the NPPF guidance. Now, the NPPF talks about recognising the intrinsic beauty of the landscape. And so in way our policies, they reflect that, but they place a degree of constraint. And so we've found a conflict with that policy. This land isn't subject to any statutory or local protective designation in as far as the landscape quality. So it's not an area of outstanding natural beauty or site SSI. It's not a special area of conservation. And so all of those landscapes are intrinsically and statutory protected. And so we're also talking about a site where the landscape effect is only invisible in public rights of way within the area, Hare Street Road to car traffic, and so it's heavily localised. And if I can sort of draw parallels with the recent appeal, the inspector took into account the localised impact of that bigger scheme. Ultimately, it was set against the backdrop of the A10, and so there are clear distinctions between the two schemes there, and members are right to pick up on that. We also have to advise that, and it's been picked up again tonight by members, that the landscape advisors have also agreed that there is this permanent, lasting landscape adverse impact. Officers ourselves consider that's a significant adverse effect. We consider that it does reduce over time to moderate because of the presence of landscaping and assimilation. And so with that, we factored that into our assessment, but there are some additional thoughts that I think might help you in shaping your views on that.
Councillor Holt.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point regarding having looked at the neighbourhood plan and looking at this field, that it is checkered as being an area of archaeological significance. And from my understanding, and sorry if I've missed it, that wasn't something that I'd seen in the report, and if that had been covered. Also, and just very quickly, is asking for clarity regarding our positions and our views. My current view is it's pretty much aligned with what Councillor Devonshire and what Councillor Estock said regarding the plan going against the district plan, the neighbourhood plan, and also being an unsustainable location for the same reasons that were identified by them. I don't think there's a need for me to repeat them, but that's where I currently stand. But yeah, it was just regarding that one question regarding it being an area of archaeological significance. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there is the reports that submitted with the application identify that there is potential for some below ground archaeology. I think that excavation works were carried out in connection with the earlier development that's been built out and the remains were found. So the standards of practice for that Historic England, or in this case the county archaeology advisors, is to attach a watch in brief condition, so that the archaeologists are appointed and they sort of record what's situations on site as construction goes on, and record that and submit that to us, which is then we then look at and approve if it sort of meets the what's required.
Thank you.
Councillor Still.
I think it's a battle for all of us, to be honest, but in the time I've been in DMC, every single large site we've looked at, we've had the same discussions and the same arguments, because it's land that we value and we lose it, and that's the problem. But I don't know where we go. I mean, I think if it goes to appeal, if we refuse it, say, and it goes to appeal, they get it on appeal, then we lose the control of some of the ways the houses are built, because they can do what they want to do, and we haven't got the same control. But if we actually go along with the system, we can call the reserve matters in, and we can actually control what the build out is. But this is the problem. Half of Buntingford has been developed, as my colleagues behind me know, and it was built on appeals, because we refused them all, and because they were in the rural land beyond the green belt, and we didn't have a district plan in those days, they got all these massive sites built all over the place, and they had no real control about what was built. And I think that's the dilemma I think we're all in, really. It's just this, we've got to have this control, and sometimes we've got to think about the best way we can get the control to end up with the thing that perhaps people will grow to live with. Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier you said something about you have your say what you think. So I'm going to say what I think. The officers have quite clearly stated that district plan has less weight because we haven't got a 5-year land supply, which I fully understand. I understand the tilted balance. However, that district plan took a long time to write. And the reason it took a long time to write is because there was a department, and that they spent years and years trying to get it right and trying to get those policies right. And we eventually adopted it after a long time. So I feel a bit, as Councillor Estott has said, I don't want to just dismiss it and throw that to one side. It's a huge amount of effort to produce that district plan. It took many years to adopt it, and I think we have to take into account those policies. They weren't things that were made in 10 minutes. They took, I think, about 8 years to get that plan together. And I think it's important that we at least look at those policies and consider them. Thank you.
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I'd just like a little bit of a point of clarification on if we were to call in the reserved matters. Again, I suppose we would be looking at the those in terms of the district plan. But then, is the district plan out of date? So, would we have any more control than? Would we have any actual control over them?
Well, I think a lot of the sort of, if you're looking at sort of assessing the sort of good design and things like that, the assessment wouldn't necessarily change that much in terms of the tilted balance, because the housing, the principle of housing, that number of housing is kind of established with the original consent. So I don't see it as being a situation where you have to sort of set aside those policies. I think they're sort of very much at the forefront of a consideration of a reserve matters.
The other elements that may be of interest, such as the landscaping quality, the location of the bus stops, cycle routes, the actual routes in and around, you know, the site itself, the connection points. So the detail of those will be subject to consultation, and so you get an input on also the scale design of the apartments or the homes themselves, as well, is something that you would be consulted on. The heights of the buildings. It may be that you have views on heights that need to be taken into account that we can consider. So, but that is, you know, the principle of development is established through an outline application. The drainage strategy is something that, for the outline element, is something that, again, if that's something that is a concern that hasn't been ironed out as part of the condition, then that's something that can be interrogated further, and you can question that. But most of the principal issues are addressed.
Councillor Hill.
Hi. But this is just clarification, really, and education for myself. The developers have promised a lot of money to improve bus services. Can we put a requirement in that they're integrated and you can take bikes on the buses? So that if you actually go somewhere, you can then cycle to your destination?
I think that would probably be a bit of a step too far. It was subject to a lot of other organisations. You know, we will take the money and then pass it on to county council, highway authority, but then buses are subject to other operators and so on. So I think it wouldn't be something we could require as part of the planning application, fortunately.
I have a second point. Also on the layout of the development, Dunlop's point, when you drive up the hill, it's very close. The houses are very close to the boundary with Thing Road. Could we stipulate that there's an inset where you maybe have small 10 metres of trees or something to hide it? And so it's more enveloped by trees. Because it is on the other side, there is quite a thick bit of forestry trees that do hide it, you know.
You talk about on the west side of the site.
Oh, yeah, probably, yeah. Sense of direction's not good.
Sarah Saunders.
You mean?
Nope, sorry.
I'd just like to come back on a point Ian Devonshire made, so I'll follow on after.
All right.
In terms of the sort of building setbacks, so that, I mean, the proposal for the housing is set back an amount from the frontage. You can see the development parcels sort of set back there, and then there'll be footpaths through landscape behind those. It would be difficult to change the parcels now. You know, that's a sort of integral part of the sort of the application, really. But the design code would sort of deal with how the sort of buildings front those spaces, for instance. You know, what kind of, you know, what best sort of house typologies and how they should address that space. There's also going to be new landscaping proposed, new tree planting, particularly whilst there is some tree loss in front of the medical centre. There's also new trees proposed there as well, which may also soften the appearance of the frontage.
Councillor Copley, did you have your... Sorry. Oh, yes.
Can I just come back on a point Councillor Devonshire made, because I understand your concerns about the district plan and the length of time it took to prepare, but that really isn't a factor. You know, during the life of span of a plan and its plan period, circumstances change, and good plans are there to provide some certainty with the strategy, but also some flexibility as well for those changing circumstances. So, you know, we have had a change of circumstance here. The tilted balance has been engaged, and we have to take that into consideration. So I hear what you're saying about the preparation that went into the district plan, and the same amount of kind of effort and energy will go into the review of the district plan. But we have to be really realistic about that circumstances do change during the lifetime of a plan, and we need to recognise what we've got before us and the situation we're currently in presently.
So, members, I'm reluctant. Oh, Councillor Carter.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify, if we were mind, if the committee did decide to accept this, approve this, but wanted to look at the reserved matters again, what do we have to agree? Would we have to agree that now, or would we agree that later?
certain reserved matters would come to the chair to decide whether it could, Sarah.
Yeah, so it's the call-in process that you would go through in order to bring forward an application to a reserved matters application to committee. So call-in process at the moment is obviously you'd put in a request for it to be considered by the chair of the committee, and if they accept the reasons set out and they have to be planning reasons, then it can be brought to committee, and that's the usual process at the moment.
And Peter wants me to say planning referral consent form. Councillor Holt.
Thank you. One last point from me. If the committee was to approve the application and go against district plan, how much would that damage the weight of the district plan in future and for future applications? Thank you.
I think, well, every site's different and the considerations are different on those sites. The planning balance is different. So it's not, we wouldn't see that as being a sort of damaging the district plan. We're in the situation we're in with the 5-year housing land supply. So, if we were able to sort of reach that point again, then plan policies would be able to be given greater weight, and the balance would then be different across every, sort of site we consider, really. So I suppose we're looking at it in the here and now, the circumstances we're in sort of right now. They're likely to change in future.
Yeah, it's a good question, because clearly this isn't the only speculative application that's in the district at the moment, and whilst the tilted balance applies, which is, as we're sort of talking about, is setting a lower bar for passing, it means that other sites are subject to that lower bar for this interim period of time. Councillor Istop has mentioned several applications that were discussed and debated as part of the 5-year supply argument, and whilst there were arguments that we put forward to suggest that they were deliverable and should be taken into account, they weren't. But that's not to say that they won't become deliverable in the next year maybe. And so if they do become delivered within the next year, along with the more strategic sites in the district council, and if there are other approvals that are taking place, such as the appeal scheme, for instance, then the tilted balance will apply for less time. So we will we'll be able to defend the district plan again once the 5-year supply is secured.
Members, if anyone's minded to go for a refusal, I would rather it came as a proposal for refusal, seconded and voted on that way, rather than me call a final vote for approval and then for that to potentially fall. So if there's anyone. Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you. Yeah, I propose we refuse it on the grounds of it's against the following policies: DES 1, BUNT 1, GBR 2, and the neighbourhood plan.
Repeat those policies. Could you repeat those, please?
Yeah, DES 1, BUNT 1, BUNT 1, and GBR 2, and the neighbourhood plan.
Do I have a seconder? No, wait a minute. Councillor Estop is wanting to.
Can I ask?
Sorry. Wait a minute. Do I have to ask for a second?
They can still discuss.
Yeah, you can discuss now. That's fine. Sorry.
Can I ask whether the development strategy guiding principles are something that can be quoted in that way?
Sorry, could you? I didn't quite catch that question.
If we're looking at what policies would be cited, can that include the development strategy guiding principles, which is on page 28 of the plan?
Do you mean in the 28 of the district plan?
Of the district plan, yes.
That policy DES 1, do you mean policy DES 1?
So that's not DES 1, it's the chapter 3 is development strategy, and the guiding principles are about where to allocate sites and how to, how to structure the allocation of housing. And so those guiding principles are actually encapsulating the strategy for the whole district.
The strategy, those principles are not part of the policy. So the policy DPS 1, DPS 2, DPS 3 sets out the nuts and bolts of the policy, and it's those elements that you need to be looking at.
Councillor Holt, did you?
No, I was just going to second councillor Devonshire's motion. I wasn't going to.
Well, are you going to second? Are you seconding it?
I will, unless there was any other comments.
Councillor, can I just confirm what the full motion was?
Yeah, that we reject this application on the grounds that it doesn't comply with DES 1, Bunts 1, GBR 2 and the neighbourhood plan.
And it's seconded by
Councillor Holt.
And can we be clear on what the harm is?
Doesn't comply with those policies.
That doesn't answer the question, though. What's the harm?
That it undermines those policies. That would.
It still doesn't quantify the harm.
Perhaps, I don't know, in terms of when we're talking about the harm, maybe some thought should go into, sort of, we've talked a lot about sustainability. There's also the landscape issue. Maybe, in terms of being specific about that kind of if we go back to the planning, if we could go to the next slide, please. In terms of these sort of issues here, these are all like identified harms, conflicts with policy. The landscape one in particular is relevant to DES 2.
The other thing is, you have to be satisfied that the harms, and I'm going to use the MPPF term, significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And on this slide, I think you've got the negative weight listed. So between those, you need to find or apply judgment in the way that we've discussed, where there's significant and demonstrable outweighing of the benefits that are listed on the other page. So if you click on that page for now, that's probably the one to focus on.
Councillor Connolly.
Well, one of the harms for me is the loss of agricultural land and the loss of food supply.
That is only a limited harm, and if you were to apportion more harm on that basis, that becomes a very difficult, defensible reason to resist the application because of how this is treated in appeals and getting planning case law. And so I think we would encourage you to think of something else that was perhaps more robust, that you were more concerned.
What about loss of open space on the outside of the development? It's not even in the Buntingford town development. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Just Councillor Carter, then.
Thank you. Yes. So one of the significant positive weight was given to the medical centre, but that's not supported by the evidence that we've heard from the the residents don't consider that as a positive location for the site. Although they might want a medical centre, they don't want it there, or so I understand. And the location is not sustainable for that medical centre. So I think significant positive weight could be reduced. That would be one suggestion.
But I'm not sure. Would that be okay? Councillor Copley and then Councillor Holt.
Okay. I think we were still focusing on what the significant harm would be. And clearly, as people have already explained, it conflicts with the development plan strategy. And so it's going to have obviously a large-scale development in the rural area, which is going to have a significant negative impact on Buntingford, given its lack of train station, etc., and the lack of schools. It's also not sustainable in terms of Buntingford, again, due to the lack of transport options. There's also the loss of agricultural land, and obviously we talked about the general impact on the landscape, which will be significant, given where it is. It's not an infill land, it's actually within the rural landscape, which is not just a visual impact, but I think a wider one on the whole area. I think, you know, obviously we've noted there about Alswick Hall, but I don't think that's a great weight. But I think really it's that big harm to the landscape, the lack of sustainability, and in terms of, you know, transport particularly as well, because people will be relying on their motor vehicles and things like that, and obviously going against all those policies.
Councillor Holt, and then
My points were just summed up very well, so nothing else from me. Thank you.
Councillor Estop.
So I think that Councillor Copley covered it, but I'm looking at the Buntingford chapter. I think the harm is the impact of a speculative development on the infrastructure of a minor town.
Is the harm covered?
The difficulty with that one is that all of the statutory consultees have not objected on the basis of infrastructure, and so effectively, if we're refusing it on infrastructure, we need to find technical evidence to indicate what infrastructure is being harmed as a result. And bearing in mind that all statutory consultees have found in favour of this, there's some risk if we were to go down that route.
Councillor, have we concluded the Councillor Copley, did you?
All I was going to say is, should we vote on it?
Well,
The motion on the table at the moment is to refuse based on DES 1, Bunt 1, GBR2 and the neighbourhood plan. The motion has to be amended to take account the harm that was discussed, and it then has to be seconded.
Yeah, articulated.
Yeah, if you
need to do the full motion.
Councillor Connolly, before
I'd propose that we take what Councillor Copley just said. The meeting is being recorded, so you've got it verbatim. That's what the proposal is, to amend.
The motion was from Councillor Devonshire, so he needs to articulate exactly what it is.
Right, let's try this then. I'm proposing that we object to this application on the grounds that it does not comply with.
Councillor
Councillor Devonshire,
it's not an objection; it's a refuse.
Refusal
against officer recommendation for approval.
Right, a refusal on the grounds of it is against the following policies: DES 1, Bunt 1, GBR2, neighbourhood plan, and the harms are it has a conflict with the development strategy plan. It's getting rid of a large open area on the outside of a town development, the loss of agricultural land, the lack of sustainability, including there's only one school within the walking area of this site.
Councillor Estop.
A very minor point, which is that it should be development plan strategy at the beginning. development plan strategy.
Councillor Holt.
Could also regarding visual impact, that would be considered for the motion. Regarding
Harm to the landscape and the visual impact.
Yeah, so we've had it proposed. We've had it seconded. Nope.
I second that motion.
Wait, it's been proposed and it's been seconded. So I'm quite happy to bring that to a vote. All those in, all hands up nice and clear. All those in favour of refusing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 6.
Again? And those against?
1, 2, 3.
And abstentions?
Refused then.
No, that's so planning application is refused. So there's no other business, so I'm going to call this meeting to a close at 20 to 18. Okay, thank you.